Subscribe to my sister's channel. She will also voice her favorite plots. Let's give her a big asset. Konohagakure no Sato is a hidden leaf village, one of the 5 great hidden shinobi villages, which is located in the Land of Fire. A great village with a great history. Konoha is known for its hokage leaders. And its leaders really were the greatest, from the founder Hashirama Senju to the winner of the demon nine-tailed Minato Namikaze. But each of the leaders had their own great destiny, their own enemies. Hashirama has an old friend, Madara Uchiha. Tobirama Senju died on a mission, sacrificed himself for others. Sarutobi Hiruzen, the 3rd Hokage, also has enemies, but no one has managed to get rid of him yet. But Minato Namikaze had the most formidable enemy of all, Kubi, but Yoko. He fell in battle with him, protecting Konoha. Minato killed him, thus he saved the whole village. But at what cost? He gave his life and the life of his family for this. This story is known to all the villagers. But they also know that Kubi did not die, that the 4th Hokage did not kill him, but sealed him in the Uchiha baby. He is considered a demon who will one day destroy Konoha, and therefore they would rather get rid of him first than him. Only the Hokage protects him, though he doesn't know everything either. He doesn't know that the clan treats him like dirt under their nails and also considers him a demon. Of course, not the whole clan, but still, this is the story of the great fox sage, the son of Madara Uchiha, Naruto Uchiha, Uzumaki, Jinchuriki Kubi. But Yoko, the villagers were always too trusting and superstitious. They believed every word that the elders said, especially Danzo. When he threw a rumor that the 4th did not kill Kubi, but sealed him in a child, and that this child is now a demon, they believed immediately. And when Umbu accidentally let slip who this child was, the residents immediately decided that it was better for them to get rid of him than for him to get rid of them. And so it has been since then. Every time they saw this boy on the street, they beat him, hoping that he would die, and at first they were afraid of the Uchiha clan, because he was from their clan, but when they did nothing to them, and even encouraged them, then everything is like a chain they broke down. But, perhaps, Naruto's most terrible night was on his birthday, because on this day people did not hesitate to directly try to kill him, but at first they chased him all over Konoha and beat him, and only after that they either drowned him, or burned him, or came up with painful ways to kill him, and this birthday was no exception. A boy about 5 years old was running down the village street. He was trying to escape from the residents of Konoha, but it was clear that they were catching up with him. Just a little more and they'll corner him. And indeed, at the next turn Naruto found himself at a dead end. There was a wall in front of him. No matter how hard he tried, he could not climb it or jump over it in any way. All he could do was crouch in the corner as the crowd came closer, brandishing their weapons. "Here you are, demon!" One of the villagers shouted. "What have I done to deserve this?" Naruto thought when the crowd started beating him, he felt a burning hatred for all of them. He also felt fear when one of the residents lit a torch and came closer to him, and another attacked from behind and began to strangle him. All his feelings were mixed into one: fear, penetrating to the very bones, pain that was everywhere, anger at himself, at his helplessness, hatred for these animals and for the Uchiha clan. All this mixed into one desire: to kill them all, to destroy them. Naruto screamed in pain when a sharp pain appeared in his eyes. They hurt as if they had been poked out. But everything passed quickly, and after a few seconds, red eyes with an elongated pupil looked at the frightened people, in which one Tomio appeared. But all this quickly stopped. His eyes turned blue again, and Naruto fell face down on the ground and did not move anymore. The residents of Konoha were once again convinced that this little boy was a demon. They kicked him a couple more times and went home. Immediately, A ninja in a weasel mask with a red triangular mark on top appeared in front of the unconscious boy. He took the boy in his arms and immediately disappeared with him into the swirl of leaves. Meanwhile, in Naruto's subconscious, Naruto woke up in the middle of the sewer in the water. A huge cage towered above him. It was dark and damp everywhere. A little more and he was ready to panic, but he quickly pulled himself together, because it's not for nothing that he is an Uchiha, and they are all cold, closed and detached from everyone, proud and a little narcissistic. And the only thing Naruto learned from them was to hide his emotions, be cold and indifferent to others, and not pay attention to anyone, but remember everyone who hurt him. Slowly he got to his feet and looked around. Suddenly, red eyes appeared out of the darkness of the cage and something terrible and huge rushed to the bars. Uchiha. The beast growled, frantically trying to push its paws through the cage. Who are you? To say that Naruto was scared is nothing to say, but he remained unperturbed and calmly asked this beast, although already guessing who he was. You mean you're not afraid of me, little man? Me. The great demon, the nine-tailed fox. Kyubi, but Yoko. The fox growled deep in his throat and thrashed against the cage again. I'll kill you. I'll tear you apart. What do you want, Kyubi? The demon was distracted for a moment from trying to reach me with his paw, but immediately bared his teeth. Freedom. Remove the seal and I will take revenge on everyone. And you too. Good. From this, the fox fell out in a drop and sat down on his hind legs, nervously twitching his 9 tails. Naruto, slowly, approached the cage and climbed to the desired height. He had already touched the seal when someone threw him back. The beast crashed into his camera with renewed force and growled menacingly, showing his rather big teeth. Fourth. Madara. The demon was struggling helplessly against the cage, gnawing and scratching its bars. It was securely sealed. And freedom was so close. In front of Naruto stood a light-skinned man with dark pointed hair, which partly had a bluish tinge. The bangs framing his face almost completely covered his right eye. He was dressed in the standard outfit of the Uchiha clan, a black shirt with a high collar left slightly unbuttoned, and the Uchiha coat of arms on his back, along with blue pants and bandages, which the shins were tied. The second man was light-skinned, blue eyes and yellow hair, dressed in a standard blue shinobi suit with a chunin vest, over which he often wore a white raincoat with a red fire pattern on the hem, sleeveless, but with a high collar, a kage raincoat. The eyes of both shone with kindness, love and friendliness, but if the first one stood calmly, and his lips trembled slightly, then the second one smiled broadly. Who are you? Naruto asked, not a bit embarrassed or scared. Didn't anyone tell you? The fourth opened his eyes wide. I'm your dad. Minato Namikaze. And you? Uchiha carefully looked at the former Hokage and turned to Madara. Your father is Uchiha Madara. Explain yourself. The boy was internally surprised by this turn of events, but remained the same cold. It seemed to him that in the eyes of the dark-haired man he saw a sign of pride in him. You see, Naruto, Minato brought his hand back and nervously rubbed the back of his head. In general. As if, I raped your mother, Naruto. I'm sorry for that. Madara lowered his head penitently. You see, something just got into me then and I couldn't control my actions, and that's why it turned out what it turned out. Minato loved Kushina, and therefore accepted her with a child, and considered you his son. Then there was a Kubi attack. It was controlled by Obito. Then Minato sealed it in you, along with his chakra and his wife's chakra. I came later, so I only managed to seal a part of my chakra into you. That's why Minato and I are in front of you right now. Madara finished his speech and breathed a sigh of relief. He looked into his son's eyes for a long time, but could not read his emotions in any way. Naruto looked at the wary Madara and the confused Minato for a long time. Uchiha Sr. decided to do something, and therefore smiled and opened his arms for hugs. The boy jumped into his father's arms without hesitation, but after a few seconds he pulled away and ran into Minato, squeezing him in his arms. "We don't have much time, Naruto," Minato began, pulling away. "We want to pass on our knowledge to you. Here, take this scroll." The fourth handed him a sealed scroll. Techniques such as the flight of the Thunder God, Rasengan and Chidori are described here. At one time Kakashi showed me how this technique works, although I did not learn it, but described it in detail here. "Good luck, Naruto. Take this scroll too." Madara handed him the same scroll as Minato. "Everything is written here about Sharingan, how to improve it and how to use it, as well as my personal taijutsu and all the fire ninjutsu that I have ever known. Naruto, I have awakened Rinnegan. If one day you see these eyes from someone else, then take them for yourself. This is a powerful dojutsu and you, as my son, have the right to use these eyes. They are yours by right of inheritance. Good luck, son. I love you." Both smiled for the last time and disappeared, went into oblivion with happy smiles on their faces. Naruto was back in the sewer in front of the cage with Kyuubi. He stared into his eyes for a few moments, and then took a step forward. "You won't be alone anymore, Kyuubi. I will be your friend and I will save you from hatred, I promise. Little man," the fox made a contemptuous grimace, but the Uchiha did not pay attention to it. "See you later, fox." Naruto disappeared from the subconscious, waking up in the hospital. In front of him stood a man in an umbu mask with black hair and the same black eyes peeking out from under the mask. "Who are you?" "I'm Uchiha Itachi, Naruto. I brought you here and I have an offer for you. What is it?" Although the boy was not a little surprised, but he did not show it, because he is an Uchiha, and this is not an empty sound. "I will train you if you agree." Itachi surprised him. "Why do you want to do this?" "Because you have awakened Sharingan. You have to learn how to use it, and it is desirable that the head of the clan does not know anything about it, because Sharingan is a rarity in our clan. And I don't think my father will be happy if Jinchuriki awakens this dojutsu. Do you agree?" Naruto weighed the pros and cons. On the one hand, to learn by yourself and when someone teaches you, and not someone, but the genius of the Uchiha clan himself. On the other hand, he is an Uchiha and they treat the demon with contempt and coldness, which means there is something else, some kind of trick. Naruto swallowed hard and made a decision. He will be trained by a genius, but he will always be on his guard. If Itachi really has something in mind, then he will find out about it and will not fall into the trap. He is an Uchiha and he will prove that he is worth the whole clan, because he is the son of Madara Uchiha, the greatest shinobi in the shadow of the Uchiha clan. "I agree." Naruto nodded decisively. "Great," Itachi said calmly. "Tomorrow at the clan training ground at 7. Don't be late. 3 years later. Uchiha clan training ground. The clang of metal on metal could be heard at the landfill. Dust was flying everywhere, the sounds of blows and the ringing of weapons were heard. Itachi skillfully defended himself, parried all the blows. Naruto beat him with all his might, tried to catch him, but Uchiha met his every blow with a block. Naruto decided to change tactics. He jumped back and created a dozen clones. 3 using the veil went underground, and the rest took Itachi in a ring and folded the seals. Element of fire, a large fireball. Itachi jumped up, but there he was met by another clone. The genius took the blow in a hard block and landed back on the ground, but immediately 2 clones grabbed him by the legs, another one hung on his waist. The clones that were standing in a circle folded the seals again. Element of fire, phoenix flowers. Uchiha realized that it was time to leave and made a body swap, appearing behind the circle. But Naruto flew at him with a burning Sharingan in his eyes. He hit the back of the head, a clone appeared out of nowhere and kicked him in the chest. Itachi blocked both blows, taking both in the grip. But before he knew it, 2 clones scattered, and the next 2 hit his knee bend. Uchiha fell on all fours and immediately a kunai was put to his throat. It looks like I won, Itachi-sensei, Naruto stated coolly. It looks like it. Well done. But you didn't even use half your strength, you were just defending yourself. That's right, Itachi smiled slightly and patted the boy on the head. I have to go, but we had a good sparring. See you tomorrow, Naruto. See you tomorrow. Itachi. 1 Uchiha disappeared, and the second began to train Rasengan according to the scroll that the 4th Hokage and part-time foster father gave him. Towards evening Naruto slowly trudged home, exhausted from fatigue, but infinitely satisfied, because he had succeeded. He mastered the last step of Rasengan and now he has something to surprise Itachi with. A lot has happened in 3 years and Naruto can't even remember everything, even though he is sometimes tormented by nostalgia. Itachi taught him many fire techniques and Sharingan skills. Shisui, with whom they were introduced by the genius of the clan, helped Naruto achieve 3 Tomio, by immersion in Tsukuyomi. Now the residents who wanted to kill him were afraid, and the students of the academy respected him, because he is the best student in the class. He was also able to make friends with the fox. Yes, at first it was hard and difficult, but over time he managed to prove that Naruto is not like all Uchiha and that he is different from Madara. Now Kurama, Kyuubi's name, is his best friend, along with Itachi and Shisui. The clan still treats him coldly and indifferently, and none of them knows that Naruto awakened Sharingan. Uchiha also managed to get acquainted with Itachi's mother, who accepted him as a native, and his brother. Sasuke, as soon as he found out that his older brother was training him, immediately took him for an opponent and is now going to give in to him in nothing. Naruto, there's something not clean here, the fox suddenly voiced. Better go away. No, Sasuke, Mikoto and Itachi are there, I can't leave them. AI, do as you like, but if I'm around, just call. There was blood all over the clan's territory and the air was heavy, as if something terrible had happened, something beyond the edge. Naruto was really scared when he saw a bunch of corpses from children to old people not on the main street of the clan. He almost vomited at the sight of blood. There was too much of her there. He would have stared at the corpses for a long time if he hadn't heard Sasuke's scream. He rushed to the sound, and found himself face to face with Itachi in the form of Umbu, and Sasuke was lying in front of him and moaning in pain. Naruto coldly, indifferently and coolly looked into the same eyes of Itachi. Why? Naruto spoke in a steely, emotionless voice. To test yourself, your strength. The genius of the clan also replied, test yourself? You're either crazy, Itachi, or something serious has happened. Whatever it is, I will get to the truth one day, no matter what it costs me. And now, Naruto formed a Rasengan in his hand and rushed to Uchiha. Get it? Rasengan, but Itachi simply caught his hand and looked at him with his new Sharingan, Manjika Sharingan. I'm sorry, Naruto, these were his last words when he looked into his eyes and Naruto fainted. Naruto doesn't know how long he woke up, but when he woke up, he felt a sharp pain in his eyes and throbbing in the back of his head, which means his Sharingan has changed. I want to leave the village. What do you think? After 10 minutes of thought, Naruto asked. Good idea. You can make a callback and learn from him as much as you want. What do you say? Kurama lazily raised his head in the subconscious. A wonderful idea. Will you show the seals? Remember. Goodbye, Konoha. I won't be back for a long time. Naruto folded the seals that Kurama showed him and disappeared straight from the hospital where he had been before. Now he is no longer a Konokovitz, he is no longer a weapon of the village. He is now a simple Naruto Uchiha, a survivor of the clan massacre, so his story begins. The story of Naruto Uchiha, the son of Madara, and later, the great sage of foxes, who will be feared by all countries, all great villages. And who will become the greatest owner of the dojutsu. But it will be a long time before that. The pain, it was everywhere, all over my body. Ni Yugito can't help but let silver tears drip from her eyes. Her hand twitched and she cried even more as the pain intensified in her arms. She felt weak, as weak and useless as she had ever felt in her life. Her head bent down and her long blonde hair covered her crying face. The muscles in her arms and shoulders burned as she hung there like a rag doll. The deep wounds left on her body by her enemy's scythe hurt like hell, and she only wanted to die as quickly as possible. These two Akatsuki easily managed to win, because of which she was very offended. She used the Biju form and no matter what the ninja said, she fought with everything she had up her sleeve, and yet she lost, and these two just don't die, no matter what techniques she used. Especially the one with the scythe, which, as she understood, had the name Haiden. She did her best to get rid of them. She scratched him to death, buried him under the rubble, burned him again and again, that a normal person would have been a bloody mess long ago. All this time when she was trying to tear him to pieces, he just hit her again with a scythe and some technique she didn't see before, slowly and of course gradually weakening her chakra. Of course, she knew what the end result would be if she continued. Thus, she used her last trump card. She accidentally stumbled upon this technique when she was training in her beast form. In theory, she charges the entire remaining chakra of her Biju in one solid sphere before releasing it. However, the risk is that she will use her entire tail chakra and it will take her a long time to recover. Nibi is not as strong as the other Biju after all. Of course, when she is now helplessly hanging on the wall, this plan has obviously failed. It's not like she did a lot of damage. One with a scythe screamed like a little girl when struck by a charged chakra. The one with the mask just dodged the attack at a tremendous speed that Yugito had never seen before. She expected the scythe guy to be dead now. She felt her strength leaving her. What she didn't expect was a sudden pain on her neck, as the named Kakuzu lifted her into the air and slammed her against the wall, making her scream when she heard it crack and felt a huge pain in her spine. He pinned her hands to the wall and left her hanging there helpless and without a chakra. Now she was here, trying to control her emotions, not wanting these two to know that she was beaten and finally lost the will to fight. "Sorry, kitten," Nibi's voice echoed in her head, which made Yugito glad to hear her friend's voice. That it was obvious that she had exhausted all her chakras to help Yugito in the fight. Yugito knew that Nibi had always had problems trusting people, and fighting here today would make him fall even more if they survived after that. "It's okay, Nibi," Yugito muttered, trying not to move because of her pierced palms. "We had a good time together." "Oh, how it hurts." The immortal's voice echoed like a bolt from the blue, and her heart sank at the realization that the one called Haiden had survived the last attack. "Thank you, Jashin-sama, otherwise I would have disappeared." "Did you take the Jinchuriki, HN?" Kakuzu simply replied in an impassive voice, and Yugito did not dare to look at them, hearing the sound of approaching footsteps to her chain-to-the-wall form. "It's impossible for the beauty of such a bitch to disappear," he mused, and it took all the disciplines of Kumo, Nin to continue acting in a semi-fainting state when he got too close. Yes, it would be such a waste. Yugito almost lost all composure as she discovered that her mouth was open and someone else's tongue was inserted into it, exploring it, intertwining the tongue with hers. She tried her best not to open her eyes as he explored her before pulling away. All this time, Yugito did not open her eyes, although tears rolled down her cheeks and fell to the floor. "That's enough, Haiden," Kakuzu grumbled. "Leader Sama is waiting for us, and you are slowing us down." Yugito breathed a sigh of relief when Haiden walked away from her. She immediately wanted to spit and rinse her mouth after it. Let's have some fun, Kakuzu, said the man, annoying her. Leader, Sama is expecting us in 5 hours. We beat up that bitch. Of course we can spend 1 hour here doing what we want with her. Ts, do what you want. Kakuzu growled. But only 1 hour, after that we will pick her up and leave without question. Of course, it's all right. Are you going to watch here? Shoo, I'll stay in the trees, Kakuzu replied simply before Yugito heard the sound of footsteps receding. Finally, some time alone, the man muttered to himself, and before Yugito could process what he meant, she couldn't hold back the scream that escaped her lips when the man pinched her nipple hard through her shirt. Her eyes opened, and she shuddered with fear as she saw the man's looming crazy face bent towards her. Shoo. I want you to wake up to hear your screams, the man standing in front of her grinned, twisting the nipple again, which caused another scream from the blonde ninja. I'm going to fuck you, you stupid girl. And before you sacrifice yourself to Jashin, I'm going to make you scream my name, Kitten Kumo. She barely recognized Haydn, who is now tearing the clothes covering her breasts and her trousers torn by his insane hands. She didn't move when he squeezed her breasts, which are bigger than average, but not so big that it would be a problem for her ninja life. Cold air seeped through her pale skin. Yugito tensed her body as he sent another spasm of pain with his touch. She gasped as he squeezed her chest. However, a piercing scream left her mouth when something he pulled her nipple, not leaving pleasure, but instead bringing pain. She knew that Haydn enjoyed the pain. He lifted her right leg, giving himself access to femininity, but when he was almost inside her, suddenly there was a sound like the chirping of 1,000 birds. Chidori. As, Haydn only managed to turn his head when the equipment hit him and he was thrown into the wall. Yugito looked at her savior or another captor and lost consciousness, hoping that the new actor would finish her off. Ah. Ka. Haydn, sitting against the wall, was spitting blood. What the fuck are you? Have you lost your fear at all, you bastard? Yes, I am Cha. Shut your mouth, he said in a calm and cold tone, closed his eyes for a moment and immediately opened them again, only they were no longer black, but red with an incomprehensible pattern. If you think you're immortal, then let me prove otherwise, you'll burn. Amaterasu, Haydn was covered with black fire in an instant, which seemed to burn him out. He screamed heartrendingly, unable to knock down the flames. The attacker calmly wiped the blood from his face and went to the girl pinned to the wall. He took it and in an instant disappeared in a black flash of lightning. A pleasant smell of something delicious hit my nose. Birds were chirping all around and there was a smell of forest freshness. The aroma of the forest interrupted the smell of food. According to the aromas floating in the air, most likely a stewed rabbit was being prepared. Yugito's mouth filled with saliva. Now that she thought about food, she remembered that she hadn't eaten before the Akatsuki appeared. Akatsuki. Yugito's eyes opened in alarm, and the first thing she noticed was that she was looking at the clear blue sky in the forest. She flinched from the too bright light, and did not arbitrarily move her hand to close her eyes. Wait. A hand? She looked at her bandaged right arm in surprise. Bandages were also placed on the left. She remembered that she was pinned to the wall by kunai. A lot of questions worried her. Something didn't add up here, something wasn't right. If the Akatsuki grabbed her, then why are her hands bandaged and why is she not tied up? In the last messages of the Reikage, it was said that the Akatsuki did not care much about the Jinchuriki taken while they were still alive. What's going on here? Yugito muttered, trying to remember what happened. The last thing she remembered was how Haydn tried to rape her, but, what happened then? Have you woken up yet? Okay, a voice came from the side, making Yugito tense up. The voice clearly belonged to a man. Slowly sitting up, Yugito saw a man bent over a pot of food. He turned his head to her and looked at her with his black eyes. he slowly straightened up and turned to her. Yugito gasped when she saw him. In her opinion, he was incredibly handsome. Black hair reached to the neck, and 2 strands on the left and right sides hung down to the shoulders. Faint traces of a mustache adorned his cheeks, making one wonder if they were birthmarks or scratches. He was wearing a black shirt, dark blue ninja pants and sandals that completed his outfit. When he looked into her eyes with his own, it seemed to her that he looked into her soul. However, she turned pale when she saw another part of his clothes. A black cloak with a red flame as the design, and the sign of someone's clan on the sleeve, and no defender on the forehead. She couldn't stop the fear that suddenly rose in her chest. There was hardly a single person who did not know this man. The legendary Sage Fox appeared out of nowhere during the attack of Suna and Otho on Konoha, when there was an exam for Chunin. He appeared several more times and destroyed the Ninja S and S++ class. There are also rumors that he saved Gaara from the sand from Akatsuki. But nothing else is known about him. No one knows who he is, where he came from, which village he belongs to and what abilities he has. But nevertheless, he scared all the leaders of the 5 great villages. They are all afraid of him and are afraid, or rather almost all. Konoha and Suna are not afraid of him, but are even ready to accept him as their dear guest. Have you seen enough? His voice brought Yugito out of her trance when she realized that she had been looking at him for too long. I'm sorry. Yugito tried to stand up and bow in apology, but was stunned when she didn't even feel her legs. Horror rose in her chest and a small whimper came out of her throat, seeing that she was clearly naked, except for the bandages that encircled her chest and parts of her body, as well as what was left of her pants. However, Yugito couldn't help but cover her chest while looking at the person in front of her. Pervert. She hissed. Really? His right eyebrow rose slowly and calmly in response to her accusation. Is this such a thank you to the person who saved you? Don't touch me. She screamed, causing the person standing in front of her to flinch at the volume before trying to stand up. The keyword is try. Horror slowly receded to give way to anger when she saw that her legs did not even move. They just lay there and didn't move. She didn't feel them. What have you done to my legs? Why aren't they moving? She screamed in both fear and anger. She could already imagine what was waiting for her when she returned to Kumo. After all, it's hard to have legs that won't help her escape from stupid residents who only want her death and her body. Being disabled, she would be a toy in their hands every minute of her life, and even Reikage would not be able to help her in any way. Residents of Kumo will not feel sympathy for Jinchuriki, who also became disabled. She would have continued to panic if not for the burning pain in her cheek, which helped her to recover. The wise fox stood over her and looked at her with cold eyes. Are you a ninja or what? Then act like a shinobi, not like a crying girl, he snapped, forcing the cat inside Yugito to shrink, recognizing the alpha in front of her. Now ask your questions in calm and restrained tones. Why aren't my legs moving? Yugito muttered, looking at the frozen limbs. What did you do with them? Nothing. It's just that your spine is damaged. Most likely you damaged it when you fought with the immortal duo. In my memory, you're the only one who could hold out against them much longer. Everyone else didn't last an hour. I believe that your spine can be fixed, but not by my efforts. Unfortunately, I am not Irionin. I am grateful to you, Yugito mumbled sadly, not looking at the man who crouched in front of her. She couldn't help but let the tears fall from her eyes. Maybe it would be better if she died in the hands of Akatsuki. Now she was incapacitated and was a burden. Yugito tensed, feeling a soft touch on her bandaged arm. Lifting her head, she was embarrassed to see Sage Fox smiling gently at her from the corners of his lips. It's going to be okay, Yugito. I know an excellent medic, one might even say a first-class one. Her head spun violently. The village report said that Sage Fox was almost a demon and a killer. Every ninja was afraid to meet him. In general, he was portrayed in the head of a young kunoichi as a man who was a sadist and a murderer who laughs when he bathes in the blood of his enemies. Seeing this man smiling at her, she can't help but wonder if this guy was just playing with her to get her out of fear or if he really is as kind as he is now. If there was one thing Yugito was very good at, it was her reading of people's auras. And his aura as a whole was comforting, not the type of killing she'd seen in most ninjas. He didn't even touch or molest her. Most shinobi missing persons usually get all the privileges of the kunoichi of the opposite side if they manage to capture it. A good example of this is Haiden, who tried to rape her. However, something bothered Yugito about his words. "How do you know my name?" "That's the question I'm usually asked when I meet a ninja," the man chuckled, getting up and returning to the pot of food, where he picked up a bowl before pouring some stew into it. Yugito blushed when she heard a loud growl of her stomach. She just realized that she was very hungry right now. The man approached her again and handed her a spoon and bowl before settling down in front of her. Being a shinobi without a village, I watch the most prominent villages and collect information, because this is the main weapon of the shinobi. You always need to know your enemy before you fight him. So you know all about me? Yugito asked cautiously, looking at the legendary ninja next to her. She had already heard the screams and insults that usually accompanied her when she was younger. "Demon. A monster. You don't deserve to live." The sage only smiled a little at her. "Of course. Yugito ni, daughter of Seal Master Saito ni and Hibi Rana. Jinchuriki is a two-tailed Biju Matatabi, who prefers to be called Nibi more. Kyumo Hunin, who has completed more than 1,025 official missions." Yugito remained silent after receiving the information known about her. Her head was spinning harder. How did he find out about the mission reports? This is extremely secret information intended only for the Raikage. Don't you think I'm a demon? She can't help but ask. Yugito would never admit it, but this question was very important to her and she, without knowing why, was vulnerable to his answer. "I don't think you're a demon. You may be a Jinchuriki, but at the same time you are a human being." Yugito just nodded, looking into her broth, which she still held in her hands, hiding the tears caused by this simple statement. "I don't care what anyone else thinks, but you're not a demon," he explained. She could feel tears dripping from her eyes no matter how hard she tried to stop them. She can't believe it. Someone really thought she wasn't a demon. Someone finally saw her as a person, and not as a tool that can only be used for killing or for pleasure. If her legs had moved, she would have jumped on him with a hug. Anyway, she just smiled at him through her tears. "Thank you very much," she snorted when the black-haired handsome sage simply rubbed the back of his head. "Don't think about it, you'd better eat before it gets cold." He pointed to the bowl in her hands, which was temporarily forgotten. "And stop yelling at me already. I'm actually the same age as you." Yugito just nodded and smiled at the last statement, taking the offered spoon and starting to eat with a lighter heart. There are very few times in her life when she was happy. Today was one of them. Now she no longer cared that her savior had evil intentions on her body or in her village. He considered her nothing more than a Yugito and recognized her as a person. Not like a monster, demon, ninja. However, all thoughts about her personal life were thrown out of her head at the moment when Yugito tasted the broth. She blinked. It's the most delicious dish she's ever eaten. She attended the usual Raikage parties with the clan heads and ate food there. It was food meant for the royal family, mostly, of course, and great food. However, compared to what she was eating today, this meal was nothing. Did you like it? The sage next to her asked, and she was surprised to see how worried his face looked, even though he tried not to show it. No, it's good. For the first time in so many years of her life, Yugito laughed. In fact, it's the best thing I've had the pleasure of eating. Well, then I'm very glad. The sage only smiled slightly when Yugito giggled before she started devouring the broth. Being Jinchuriki, her appetite is usually bigger than usual, and she almost emptied the entire pot when she asked for more, forgetting that the one she asks for food from is a person who is treated very carefully by the 5 great villages. She also missed the funny looks the sage gave her when he served more food. By the 15th bowl, which Yugito finished, she was already purring with pleasure. She always had a rare opportunity to eat whatever she wanted. In Kumo, only a small sushi counter that tolerated her allowed her to buy the food she desired, but people attacked her and forced the owner to close the store, as demons don't deserve to eat human food. On this day, even with the salary of a ninja, she was forced to pick up food sometimes, because everyone inflated the price, and she went hungry several times. Yugito was silent when the man began to collect the used dishes and wash them. Immediately, she felt guilty and useless. She couldn't even bring herself to get up and help this wonderful man wash the dishes because she was disabled. It took all her willpower not to cry. She didn't want him to see her cry again. She cried more today than she had in her entire life. She focused instead on checking her bandaged wounds. Every movement made her shudder, and she knew that it would take at least a week, even when the Nibi chakra would help her, before the wounds would heal. She is not as strong as the other Jinchuriki in terms of healing, and she will need time. She came out of her thoughts when she heard the guy approaching her. Hey, Yugito, She blinked when she saw that he was a little nervous. His actions confused her. Now this is officially not the same person as in the bingo book. Although she was sure he was strong. In the end, he just defeated an immortal. Do you know that I saw you naked and I wanted to ask if I cleaned your wounds properly? He muttered, blushing slightly, and this took Yugito by surprise. And also to her horror, she found herself blushing too. Yes, Yugito was confused. Well, I'm willing to take responsibility for seeing you naked and touching you. It's just, well, if you ask for compensation. Jinchuriki Matatabi felt her jaw drop and she couldn't believe what she heard. This man was ready to take responsibility for her since he saw her naked. Her, a disabled person, a monster according to people. He would take care of her and provide for her, and in every way she would be his wife in all but name. Her head was spinning, and if it wasn't for the fact that her day was filled with surprises, she would have fainted. Anyway, she just sat there, stunned and confused. The young sage must have noticed this, because he sighed, and before Yugito realized it, she was grabbed in an embrace and lifted up to the wedding style, moving to a small pallet next to the fire. She blushed to the roots of her hair, unable to meet a person's face, afraid to show her pink face. She was also well aware that she was almost naked. Any sane man would have taken her by now, but he didn't. He even made sure that his hands stayed away from her breasts. Yugito may not know this, but she was a very beautiful girl in the prime of her youth. We'll talk again tomorrow. Take a rest, Yugito, he said, putting the disabled girl next to the fire on a pallet. Thanks again for saving my life, Yugito said, making sure their eyes met so she could convey how much she appreciated his help. I will be forever grateful. Don't think about it, Yugito, he smiled softly, taking off his black cloak and covering her like a blanket, making her snuggle snugly before hugging her harder, giving her warmth. I never got your name, she muttered. Naruto Uchiha. Yugito ran at top speed through the streets of the village. She was running away from a crowd of angry Kumo residents who saw Jinchuriki as a monster and a demon, nothing more. She was already out of breath and exhausted, but she kept running, hearing people shouting behind her, like, demon. A monster. You must die. She would have run even longer if not for the wall that met her on the way. She was at a dead end. Here you are, bitch, the escape routes were blocked. On one side is a wall, on the other the villagers. What are we going to do with her, Kyo? I think that such a beautiful one should not disappear just like that. You can have fun first, and only then kill. One grinned broadly. He was supported by all the others and moved towards her. I support you, Kyo. She shrank into a corner, shaking with fear. Yugito was afraid of what was about to happen. She prayed to all the gods she knew that they would help her. She was truly horrified when the first of them approached, taking off his pants on the move. She closed her eyes when she felt the man's touch. She didn't remember anything further, just the man's cry and something warm on her face. Yugito shuddered, waking up with a jerk and feeling her heart pounding wildly. Her breathing became erratic and she immediately tried to find a jug of water, which always stood next to the bed, on the nightstand to help her calm down during panic attacks. To her horror, she did not find it and barely held on when she realized where to be. Above her head is not the usual roof of her house, but only clouds, dawn and trees stretching to the sky, which means that it was only a dream. Her mood was already zero, but it dropped even lower when she tried to get up. Her legs did not move and she did not feel them at all. It was at this moment that she remembered what had happened, and this brought even more grief. Attempted rape and her savior. However, none of this mattered to Yugito right now. The blonde just raised her knees to her chest, hugged them and buried her nose in them, sobbing to release the emotions that were eating her alive. She was glad that she could control her voice and not cry loudly. Although at the moment she did not feel her savior next to her, she still did not want him to catch her in hysterics. Yugito held onto her knees tightly while the tears fell. The dream was as real as the first time it happened. Then Nibi helped her and released her chakra. That person then lost his arm due to the high pressure of the demonic chakra, and all the others fled. Since then, she felt even more hatred and contempt, but to all this was added the horror of her. For the people of Kumo, she was not a Jinchuriki, not a Nibi, but a demon in the flesh. If it wasn't for Matatabi, she would have broken under such pressure long ago. A small sound next to her distracted Yugito from crying and she turned to its source. She froze in shock. A few centimeters away from her sat a small animal. He made a sound. Yugito blinked slowly. She was trying to convince her brain that what she saw in front of her was real, and not her overactive imagination. In front of her was a small orange fox, the size of a cat, with charming eyes and 9 tails that swayed rhythmically behind him. She, like any ninja, knew about the tailed ones. And she knew more about Biju than anyone. However, she did not expect to see the most dangerous of them so small, charming and fluffy. That's what you are, Jinchuriki Nibi, he rumbled in a low and slightly growling voice. Yugito slowly reached out and ran her hand over his head. She was ready to pull her hand away at any moment, but, surprisingly, the most dangerous Biju in the world himself began to caress her, purring like a kitten. Kawaii. Kurama kun. Yugito's eardrums almost burst from this loud scream in her head. Only when the pain was gone did she realize that Nibi had named this cute animal Kurama. Kurama-kun? Yugito asked, feeling the cat jumping up and down in the press with happiness. Yeah. Matatabi said, answering her. That was his original name, and Kyubi was just a title. Don't tell me, kitten, that you thought his name was Kyubi. I forgot how cute and charming my brother is. Yugito was startled again by the fact that her friend went crazy at the sight of Kurama, and did not even ask how she was feeling. It was a bit insulting, but Yugito understands everything. After all, it's not every day you meet a member of your family, and she rarely sees Nibi so happy. Anyway, Yugito tried to ignore her stories about how cute her brother was and wondered where the hell her savior was. And what? Do you miss him already, kitten? Shut up, Nibi, so I'm right. Why, Nibi? Yugito squealed loudly, startling the fox, who was comfortably sitting on her feet, purring. She also didn't notice the new character who looked at her like she was crazy. Well, okay, I think you're talking to Matatabi. Naruto's voice brought Yugito out of her trance, and she blushed even more when she looked at the object of her thought standing in front of her with a pot in her hands, from which steam was rising up. She was silent, unable to utter a word, as Matatabi's perverted comments made it impossible. Yugito? Are you all red? Everything is fine? A worried voice asked her, and after a moment she almost jumped back when she felt him put his hand on her forehead, followed by an indignant scream from the disturbed Kurama, who was now annoyed, paying attention to his friend. I see you too, Kurama. Naruto suppressed a laugh when he stroked the fox cub, and he calmed down on Yugito's hips, purring again to himself. Knock him to the ground now. And kiss him, kitten. Yugito needed all his strength not to pay attention to Nibi rushing inside. Instead, she smiled brightly at Naruto. Good morning, Naruto-kun, Yugito greeted, bowing slightly. Usually she didn't treat anyone with respect, rather despised all the residents for their attitude towards her, but now she understood that if it wasn't for Naruto, she would have lost her life and Matatabi. And treating him with respect was the only thing she could do at the moment. You too, Yugito-san. How are you feeling today? I'm fine now, Yugito replied, trying to stretch her sore muscles. My legs are still as useless as they were yesterday. Don't worry, Yugito-san. Naruto tried to calm down. No, Naruto-kun, she shook her head, I understand everything. We are shinobi and there is nowhere without injuries, sometimes even this can end in death. Don't worry about it anyway. There was an awkward silence between them, interrupted only by Matatabi's comments in Yugito's subconscious, making her wonder if she looked more like a ripe tomato right now. Naruto's gaze fell on the pot in his hands and he barely refrained from slapping his forehead. Hey, Yugito-san, do you want to have breakfast? He finally asked, and Yugito breathed a sigh of relief when the awkward silence broke. She nodded her head quickly. I would like that, Naruto-kun, she replied with a small smile. Yugito's mouth was filled with saliva when Naruto, taking out bowls, began to pour fragrant ramen. Even Kurama, sleeping peacefully on her feet, raised his head and began to sniff, catching a delicious smell. How did you know it was my favorite? Yugito couldn't help but ask when Naruto handed her one of the bowls. She immediately ignored Nibi, who was grumbling in her subconscious about how unfair it was that she and Kurama-kun could eat now, but she couldn't. The sage shyly rubbed the back of his head, handing her chopsticks and placing a second bowl of ramen in front of the fox. Well, I made it while you were sleeping. I still had some ingredients sealed in the scrolls for cooking. And where were you after? Checking the perimeter. I'm sure Kakuzu will try to capture you even though his partner is dead. Rather, even to avenge the second, immortal. I understand. Do you know any of them? Yugito asked while enjoying her breakfast. Yes, Naruto replied, settling down next to Yugito and putting one of the bowls in his hands to Kurami, who had already eaten the first portion. The one who tried to rape you was Haiden. He is immortal, being one of the 3 fans of Jashin who exist in the world now. He is not afraid of either a mortal wound or ninjutsu. The only thing that can stop it is sealing, exactly until some idiot opens it, and the black flame of Amaterasu. And he won't die from anything else, he'll just need to get to the thread with a needle, and he'll be as good as new. And if you tear it into pieces, like a splitting jutsu? Yugito asked, looking up from her bowl of noodles. Naruto froze, thinking. But it's true, no one tried to test the theory of splitting. In principle, this may work, because then he will not be able to sew himself up, and someone else will also be unable to help. I never thought about it. You're a genius, Yugito-san. I was glad to help. Yugito smiled happily. What about his partner? What about him? Uchiha blinked slowly and looked at the girl. Does he have any special features, like a jascist? Yes, Naruto shrugged his shoulders. His name is Kakuzu. This guy, along with his partner, is called the Immortal Duo. He is not as dangerous as Haiden, but he is also strong. In a word, he fought with Shodai Hokage and survived. Yugito almost choked on the second bowl of ramen when she looked at Uchiha incredulously. It's impossible. The first Hokage is the generation before us, if not more. Naruto only got an evil grin at her statement. It's a privilege to be immortal, Yugito-san. It is said that he takes the hearts of his enemies, who provide him with life. Does he eat them? Yugito asked in fright. The act of being killed so that later someone, like Kakuzu, would eat your heart made you sick. That's a big question, isn't it? Naruto said, finishing his bowl. My spies are very accurate, but they still can't figure out what he's doing with the hearts. We'll know when we see it. It doesn't seem encouraging, Ni shivered. Shinobi should always collect information before attacking someone. Well said, Yugito. The sage laughed a little. Knowledge is power, right? After all, even the weakest ninja can defeat his opponent if he knows his weaknesses. I like to be unpredictable mostly. Jinchuriki was silent as she assessed the person in front of her again. Now she knew he wasn't a bad person. No man could resist talking to an almost naked girl all this time, not to mention that he is extremely dangerous than anyone. Even if she could walk, she would not be able to do anything. She also slept well all night in the warmth, in his arms, and he could harm her if he wanted to. She found her attitude to him unique. No, not really, just interest. Most of the Nukanins or ordinary shinobi she met were always vindictive and hated everyone, and Yugito felt that if they could, they would not hesitate to burn the whole world for their whim. But Naruto, he was different from them. He also looks good, and his smiles make her blush several times a day. To think that her Biju also approved of him scared her, but also gave her relief. As a perverted cat, as a non-comment, she never recommended a person to anyone. Of course, she would have commented on the cute boy that the two of them would be dating, but she had been urging Yugito not to run after a guy since they were 6 years old when they first met. And now, knowing that Nibi approved of this man, she was ready to do anything if only he was hers and only hers, no one else's. Naruto just looked at her with a sly look, and Yugito could have sworn that he knew what she was thinking right now, causing her to blush and look away. Do you want more ramen, Yugito? Kyumo Kunoichi was happy to agree as she took her third cup of ramen from her new crush. Although it wasn't intentional, the little child inside her who was still dreaming of her loved ones and family was happy to find someone to take care of her and feed her her favorite food. Sure, she may have fallen for this hero worship syndrome that girls have when they've been rescued by someone, but she hasn't complained yet. Naruto is the perfect gentleman who has been treating her like a girl all this time, although she had some questions that she needed answers to, only she had the courage to ask about it. In the end, it won't do any good if your lover hides everything all the time. Kakuzu was as unperturbed as ever when he looked at the burned man who still had a black fire burning on him and who had once been his partner. Inwardly, he was grinning, and he couldn't help but wonder if there was any way he could just leave this bastard here, buried under the rocks. Being rid of him is very attractive to Kakuzu, as he will get rid of that dirty mouth and those crazy rituals he liked to use, which delayed the bounty hunter more than he liked. Kakuzu may be one of the most dangerous people on the planet, but he is not a fan of unnecessary torture. However, losing an idiot would make Kakuzu's job more difficult, and he is not arrogant enough to admit that he is capable of killing Jinchuriki himself. Of course, he may be powerful, but he has a good sense of self-preservation. That was one of the reasons why he was still alive. Not to mention that pain would also skin him if he ever found out that Kakuzu let Haiden die for his petty grievances. The man sighed as his mind painted a picture of him being lynched by pain, and he walked over to Haiden, who was burned to the bone and showed no signs of life. The element of water, water mosquitoes, he said softly to the technician, stretching out his hand, placing it over his body. Kakuzu immediately regretted that he had done it. Black fire, as if it was just waiting for this. It immediately spread to his hand and flared up with renewed vigor, turning into a living, unquenchable flame. He jumped away from Haydn, screaming in unbearable pain. Kakuzu realized that he had no choice but to cut off his hand. Either now or later it will be too late. We must act quickly before the flame spread to the rest of his body. Kakuzu screamed and swore that whoever left this fire and killed Haydn would die in the most painful way. He will take revenge on him, so that it does not become, kitten, it's not that bad, you really think too much. He doesn't mind it. I'm sure, kitten. What? Yugito's scream echoed along the clearing, sending birds peacefully resting on the branches of a tree into the sky. God, do you really need to shout that loud? Matatabi commented, and Yugito had a mental image of an offended cat, who irritably cleaned her ears with a claw. Sorry, Nibi. I just needed to let off steam. I'm sorry I yelled at you. That's good, kitten. I know it's hard to accept, but know that I will always be there for you. Yugito just smiled and leaned her head back on the water, enjoying the cold water permeating her body. It also helped her calm down and move away from the shock, slowly washing away all the dirt from herself. She's been sitting here for who knows how long, and she still couldn't come to her senses. Yugito never expected this, but the spinal injury manifested itself not only in the immobility of the legs. She realized it too late when she finished eating with Naruto, and if it wasn't for Kurama, she would never have noticed it. She staggered and accidentally hit the ground with her hand, leaving her own puddle of excess waste in the place where she was lying. She took a look at what had happened before her mind completely shut down and she couldn't even cry anymore as the stench was unbearable. She didn't feel it coming out of her, and she lost all sense of control and pride, afraid to even look at her savior, not wanting to see in his eyes the condemnation that stands there. Nibi, of course, always the older sister that Yugito never had, immediately diagnosed her body, and the results trampled Yugito's already trampled self-esteem even more. Apparently, due to damage to her spine, the internal organs responsible for the intestines and bladder refused to work. Perhaps if a healer had checked her right away, everything would have been fine. But now, Nibi tried to do everything in her power to heal Yugito, but it hardly helped much. The blonde did not realize that she was still crying when she felt gentle hands taking her under the wedding style, feels like strong hands protecting her, even when she is connected with the waist stuck on her legs. She immediately opened her eyes, and found herself blushing violently when she saw the black, onyx-like eyes of her savior, who looked at her not with pity, but with protection. Despite her shame and self-loathing, she felt protected and felt an extraordinary warmth filling her, as if someone had lit a candle in her heart, making her feel something she had never felt in her life all her years. Yugito was called a weapon and a monster. She knew that if she wanted to live, she had to be able to defend herself. But she was afraid to kill. She was afraid that one day she would not be able to fight off the inhabitants and Nibi would not be able to help her, and the inhabitants would do with her what they had wanted for a long time. In general, Yugito was in fear, pain and condemnation every day of her life. For someone to look at her as if she was precious, too much for her, and she cried all the time while the sage walked with her in his arms to the river to help her wash. It was there that Yugito immediately began to hate herself for being such a burden when she looked at the condition of the man she fell in love with. The front of his clothes was almost completely covered in feces, not to mention that his bare arms were also stained. She couldn't help but wonder how Naruto found it not disgusting. And when she gave him a questioning look, he just smiled and told her that everything was fine and he would take care of her. She didn't understand him at all. I don't understand Nibi, Yugito finally said, looking at the water and thinking about him. Don't you understand what, kitten? Asked the cat, who was silent while her friend was struggling with her feelings and mind. How can such people exist in this world? Yugito asked as she put her hand on her motionless legs that are underwater. I've never met people like him. Good people who are willing to help without asking for anything in return. Are you sure about him, kitten? Nibi asked with a hint of doubt in her voice. I have to agree that he is very different from most, but he is still a man, and men really need it. He doesn't react to me, even when I'm almost naked in front of him and defenseless, Yugito noted. Maybe he's just waiting for you to start trusting him unconditionally, suggested the cat. You may not be as strong as he is, but you can hurt him if you want to. And I thought you were the one who told me to kiss him some time ago, Yugito grinned at her friend, and she immediately got an image of a cat that was sitting frowning at her. Me. Although I have to admit that I'm starting to protect you, seeing that you're starting to love him. You can't blame an older sister for taking care of her younger sister, Yugito only smiled at her friend. Thank you, Nibi. Without you, I'd be nothing but a broken doll for those idiots. That's why I'm amazing, kitten, Matatabi purred, and Yugito just shook her head at Biju's statement. She had almost forgotten that she felt great enjoying the cold water. Looking down in the direction in which she could see her protector, Yugito couldn't help but help her perverted side come out as she crawled towards the rock separating her from Uchiha. After he lowered her into the water, checking that she wasn't too tall or too low for her to fully undress without worrying about him seeing her naked, Naruto apologized, saying he would stay on the other side of the river to give her personal space. Yugito objected that he had already seen her naked, but this man stubbornly left her alone with the words, just shout if you get attacked. Such a gentleman, Yugito thought, looking at the stones. A small sigh came out of her mouth when she saw the picture before her eyes. Inside, she felt that Nibi was drooling almost an ocean, and she couldn't blame her for that. What she saw, in her opinion, was the most beautiful man she had ever seen. Yugito may never admit it, but she had a little crush on the fourth Hokage Konoha when they discussed history during her academic days. The man was handsome, no one could deny it. Almost half of the girls in her class would agree with her opinion if they were pressured. However, seeing almost the same person, only even more beautiful, besides without a shirt and with drops of water all over his body, was better than any photo. She barely noticed the blood that flowed from her nose, and it took her a lot of effort to crawl back to her seat, trying to regain control of her feelings. This includes dipping yourself over and over in cold water so as not to do any inappropriate things. However, when the pumped-up body of her savior appeared before her eyes again, she immediately looked at the clouds that were floating on the horizon. It was a complete work of art, Nibi finished, causing Yugito to frown after her friend's words. Hey, don't steal my man. Nibi finished, causing Yugito to stop and blush in horror when she realized her words. Yes, for the first time in her life, Yugito realized that she loved someone. Nibi's perverted giggling made her frown, though she doesn't know why. Don't worry, kitten, he's yours. I can't wait to see that my kitten finally got someone, she exclaimed, trying to make Yugito frown again. I'm not in love. She protested. I never said that. Nibi's funny laugh made the girl frown even more when she realized what she meant. You only assumed that I thought so, but you really love him. Nibi. Yugito whined, but Nibi's giggling made her shut up. Oh, don't worry, kitten, I'm glad something like this is happening to you. Good people like him are hard to find these days. Especially shinobi. As a sister to you, I still prefer him to any other person. What do you mean, Nibi? Yugito asked, confused. Yugito could almost see the sly look on the cat's face inside her when Nibi replied, this means that if he ever comes with rings and a proposal to my kitten, then he already has my blessing, Sage Fox was in a panic 5 minutes later when he discovered that Jinchuriki Nibi had almost drowned after she fainted at the words of her best friend. Naruto tried to bring her to consciousness by artificial respiration. He did not see or hear the giggles of Nibi, who received good materials for blackmail on her kitten. When she was kissed by a man whom she begins to love very much, Yugito wondered if she looked like a tomato now, like she had all morning. This did not help Nibi, who received a rush of happiness and joy, and is now jumping around in a circle, shouting with joy and victory. The cat described in great detail the moment when Naruto kissed her. Yugito would have fainted again if not for Nibi, who prevented her from falling into the saving darkness again. Right now, Yugito is sitting on a tree stump while Naruto is running around cleaning up the camp to hide that someone was here. Fortunately, she managed to change her bandages herself, not wanting Naruto to do it for her. Yes, Yugito already trusted him a lot, but the fear inside her, which made up most of her life, due to the fact that she was always mistaken for a monster and tried to kill and rape, made her freeze with horror. A small made Yugito look down in order to see a little fox looking at her with charming reddish eyes. 9 tails were moving behind him. Having enough experience with Nibi, who liked to be petted all the time, Yugito took the little fox by the stomach and put it on her lap, slowly stroking the soft fur on her head. It didn't take long for the little animal to start purring with pleasure, its tails moving in all directions. Yugito only smiled at this before she started scratching her ear while giggling softly. "You know what animals need, kitten," Nibi commented inside her, and Yugito curved his lips upward, smiling. "It's because I have a good teacher like you, Nibi. That's it, thanks, kitten," the cat purred inside her before falling silent for a while. Kurama-kun always loves affection. I still remember old man Hagoromo doing it when we were still just born. Being the youngest, he was the closest to the old man and spent most of his time next to him. "Who is this old Hagoromo you're talking about, Nibi?" Yugito asked. She was interested because this is the first time Matatabi tells her something from his life. She felt the cat smirk inside her before she got an answer to her question. "He is also known as the Sage of the 6 Paths," she replied smugly, causing Yugito to stop from gently fingering the little fox's fur. Because of which Kurama whined, but Jinchuriki Nibi ignored him, processing the incoming information. "Which ones?" Yugito shouted loudly. "The Sage of the 6 Paths, the one who founded the ninja doctrine and is the creator of the shinobi world." "Well, not exactly the creator. It's too hard for me to explain it, because explaining things has never been my strong suit. Kurama-kun used to do this, as he is the most talkative of all of us." However, a small frown appeared on the cat's face. "We prefer to call him father since he raised and took care of us before he died of old age." "I see," Yugito nodded, still ignoring the demanding pokes in the palm that the fox gave her, demanding the continuation of the caress. "Why isn't it in the history books, Nibi? Something so important should be kept in the history of the shinobi world, in ancient scrolls." "Maybe it's because no one ever knew about it," the cat replied. "People have always assumed that we came to this earth to give them power, and were nothing more than demons. The old man tried his best to hide this information and instructed us to tell only those we trust about it." Yugito smiled, and if she could, she would hug her Biju for being so wonderful and trusting her with one of the most important information. Anyway, she focused on sending her feelings so that Matatabi would understand how much she valued her trust. "Thank you, Nibi." "Don't think about it, kitten," the cat replied with a slight yawn, showing Yugito an image of a blue cat falling asleep on a small bed. "Now I'm going to take a nap. By the way, you'd better stop talking to me for a minute, because the guy you love is standing in front of you." "Don't do anything I would do," she finished with a perverted giggle, causing Yugito to tense up as she returned to the real world, looking at Naruto's surprised face, who was looking at her. Immediately, Yugito blushed terribly, and with all her efforts forced herself to look at him. Why does he have to be so beautiful? Yugito screamed in her mind, trying to maintain some semblance of control over her body so as not to do anything out of line. It didn't help, as she kept imagining his perfect body, which she had seen on the river a few hours before. She barely had time to cover her nose when her perverted side went up a notch. So, did you have a good talk with Nibby? The man asked, pulling the blonde out of her thoughts, and she blinked in surprise. How did you know I was talking to Nibby? She couldn't help but be surprised. Fortunately, Naruto answered the question, so she can see the disbelief in his face. I used to do this to Kurama before I managed to get him out of me. He waved away, pointing at the pouting fox who was trying to get her attention. Yugito blinked again at the information she had just received, and if it wasn't for the fact that she was starting to get used to the huge surprises she was experiencing today, then her brain would have broken then. Anyway, she just looked at the little red fox, who was diligently sniffing at something and anxiously wiggling his tails. Okay, was the best thing she could say right now. How could you do that without killing yourself? She was well aware that the Jinchuriki, from which the Biju was extracted, were dying. Naruto, I feel someone else's chakra. We have guests. Kurama looked up with red eyes. Uchiha, waiting for his further instructions. How much? 10 people. Yugito shrank in fright, guessing that Raikage most likely sent Umbu after her. Fine. Naruto was silent for a moment, seeing how the two-tailed Jinchuriki was trembling, and immediately crouched down in front of her, pulling her into a warm embrace. Yugito, don't worry, I won't let anyone hurt you. I promise. Kurama, he turned his head to the fox, pulling away from the calmed blonde, you have the protection of Yugito. I'll deal with those ninjas myself. Naruto didn't say a word more, just got up, grabbed the sword that appeared from the seal tighter and went forward to meet the guests. At first everything was quiet, but after a few minutes, Yugito heard the first screams, followed by pleas for help. Naruto landed on a wide branch of a tree, calculating the distance. When there was not much left to him, he took out a fox mask from the seal and put it on his face, smiling. The technique of hiding in the fog. Uchiha was incredibly grateful to Zabuza for such a great technique. Everything was covered with a thick fog for several hundred miles. Nothing could be seen, unless, of course, you have a Sharingan or Byakugan. Clutching his katana, Naruto rushed forward to the first opponent at high speed. But he decided not to kill the first one, but to immerse him in genjutsu. He killed the second, the third dodged in time, but got hit, shouting loudly, but immediately cut off his scream. The next one did not have time to utter a sound, as he fell down from the branch. The fifth was able to repel 2 blows, but his kunai could not stand the third and broke, and the sword sank into his head. The other 4 suffered the same fate as the previous ones. Only one of them lasted longer than the others, and kunai struck Naruto on the shoulder. Only with this he angered him. He was waiting for a fate worse than the previous ones. He plunged into the most powerful genjutsu and after a few seconds began to beg for mercy, then committed suicide. Having finished with everyone, Uchiha pulled the first opponent out of the illusion and put him on his feet, looking at him with a burning Sharingan in his eyes. Run, he released the Anbushnik from his hands and broke his mask. Run and tell the Raikage that from now on Jinchuriki two-tailed is dead. Let him remember that he should not cross my path. Send Umbu again and I will come for his head. Run. With a slow and unhurried step, Naruto went back to Yugito, putting the mask and katana back into the seal along the way to Kami. I stink of blood from a kilometer anyway. Yugito sat tensely listening to the screams of the enemies. Kurama was calmly purring on her lap, lost in a doze. The girl couldn't help but wonder, what the hell is going on there? Suddenly everything was quiet again and in this silence there were only the sounds of footsteps. Kurama, I told you to guard Yugito, not to sleep. The sage was indignant, who slowly approached them, covered in blood, but as calm and caring as ever. One does not interfere with the other. The fox lazily opened one eye and examined the Uchiha from head to toe, stopping his gaze on his face. Better go wash up, you stink of blood, and change your clothes, otherwise you look like a pig, Sharingan. The rug is shaggy, he calmly retorted, smiling slightly. Really, I'm going to wash up, and then, Yugito, we'll go to Konoha. Konoha? The girl looked at him in bewilderment, not understanding why they should go to this village. Besides, Cloud and Konoha have been in unfriendly relations for a long time, even though they are not fighting, but still. Will the Hokage there accept a ninja Cloud in his village, even though the former one, in her, I told you that I know a first-class medic. So we will go to him. By the way, now for the rakeage, as well as for the rest of the village, you are dead by the hand of the wise fox, who wanted to get himself a bija. What? Yugito, to be honest, was a little shocked by this turn of events. It turns out that now she is free, she will not be searched for and will not be declared a nuke ninja. You are now free from your village and shinobi duties to the rakeage. Everything will be fine now, Yugito. He walked up to her, but instead of hugging her, he kissed her on the cheek so as not to get blood on her. Then he pulled away, smiled and went to the river to wash off the blood. Yugito, on the other hand, sat in prostration and wondered if she looked like a ripe tomato or something even redder, only much bigger. And only one thought was beating in her head: I'm free now. Half an hour later, Naruto appeared in front of Yugito in all its glory. He was wearing a t-shirt with a jacket and black umbu pants. He smiled softly at her with the corners of his lips, ruffling his hair. Yugito stared at him so intently and did not immediately realize that someone was butting her head. And looking down, she saw Kurama, who was indignantly rubbing against her hand, demanding affection. Smiling, she began to stroke him, simultaneously watching Naruto frantically wondering if he had forgotten something. Naruto, she turned to him, remembering one very important thing: how are you going to get me to Konoha? What do you mean? The black-haired man asked as he hung the massive scroll on his back. Don't be stupid, Naruto, Yugito sighed, rubbing her forehead. As you can see, I can't walk. How are you going to get me there? Well, I can carry you, he offered, winking and making Yugito blush at his teasing tone. Oh, kitten, accept this, Nibby's excited and very perverted voice immediately echoed on her head. Imagine that he is holding you under the wedding style, his hands are stroking your body. Then he looks at you with his black onyx eyes and catches your eyes with his own, slowly approaching your lips. Yugito immediately cut the connection with Biju, blushing terribly at her words. It didn't help that Naruto's eyebrow rose when he saw that she was changing her usual color to pale bright red. Yugito, are you okay? Are you not sick? He asked, and Yugito could practically feel the anxiety rolling through him in waves. No. Yugito squeaked in horror at how high her voice was. Would it be possible if I just rode on your back? Of course, why not? Naruto just shrugged his shoulders. But please put this on first, in case we meet someone. Others hardly have the same control over their hormones as I do, and we don't want them to see you almost naked, do we? He handed her his cape with the inscription Sage Fox before turning his back on her and bending down in front of her so she could climb on his back. Yugito had to agree with him when she took the cloak from his hands. She didn't want to be some kind of toy for anyone. And if what Naruto said was true, they could meet ninjas, and perhaps among them Kyumo shinobi, who would take advantage of her presence there, although she was sure that Uchiha would not let her offend. She felt a little comforted by the fact that she was with Naruto. Any shinobi with half a brain would run at the sight of a wise fox so that only his heels would sparkle. Yugito knew that Naruto, after all, had a reputation as a bloodthirsty killer, and in the shinobi world, such a reputation was sometimes more than enough to make an army shamefully flee. Hugging the cloak with both hands, Yugito marveled at him. He looked sturdy enough that he wouldn't be torn apart if someone accidentally hit him with a jutsu. It was obviously of the highest quality, and Yugito was astute enough to know that a precious piece of clothing like this was really expensive. That's just what she wanted to know about Naruto. Anyway, Nibi Jinchuriki put her hands in her sleeves, and immediately appreciated his softness. You can walk in this all day and feel comfortable at the same time. It was also a good thing that his stand-up collar was high enough to cover at least half of her face on the sides, and it went all the way down to her feet, completely hiding her bandaged upper half, which had no clothes. With this, she would be almost completely invisible to any shinobi. Hey, Yugito, are you coming or what? Naruto's voice rang out, forcing Yugito to distract himself from his thoughts. She blushed a little when she saw Naruto squatting down, waiting for her to get up. Now that she thought about it, she was completely confused. The man will hold her by the outside of her thighs, and since she only wears shorts, it will be skin-to-skin contact when his hands touch her legs. Ignoring Nibi's perverted chuckle, Yugito bent over and blushed terribly as her body began to press on Naruto's back, even as she wrapped her arms around his neck. She had forgotten that she was well endowed by nature, and her breasts were practically pressing down on his back. Yugito was grateful that Naruto didn't comment, although he could feel how he was slowly getting excited when they pressed against each other, when he was standing, and her motionless legs hung down like vines, only when Naruto picked her up under her feet and held them firmly so that she was in a position under his full control. It also helps that the massive scroll tied to his waist is below her back. She could sit on it comfortably and reduce the tension of her hips and legs held by Naruto. In general, now her situation is under control, and although they can't see each other, it was obvious to any passerby that they both react with humor to how red they are. A small growl made Yugito look down and see that Kurama, with only one tail, was now climbing Naruto's pants, gracefully making his way over him, and sitting on top of his head. He swayed, not growling loudly. And you forgot about me. Yugito giggled at how adorable the little fox was when he settled himself comfortably on the top of his master's head and yawned sweetly, sinking into sleep. Ready to move now, Yugito? Naruto asked, and he loosened his grip a little to make her comfortable. Yes, Yugito just nodded before Naruto jumped onto the nearest tree and they started their journey to Konoha. 2 hours later, no one said a word during the 2-hour journey. Yugito slowly drifted into a half-doze, but at the same time she heard everything that was happening around her. Kurama, folding his paws and putting his muzzle on them, watched the trees, which replaced each other very quickly. Naruto was actively thinking about what to do with the Jinchuriki that had fallen on his head. Leaving and abandoning her, of course, is not an option. She made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time, a warmth that makes him smile and makes him want to protect her. It definitely affects him in some way, but in which direction is the question. He can't just leave her in Konoha either. After all, he won't let Tsunade offend her, but leaving her there just like that means abandoning her. But he can't stay in the village yet, not now, when Akatsuki became active and Sasuke killed Orochimaru. He has to find these two Uchi morons before they kill each other. And it wouldn't be bad to switch eyes with Itachi at the same time, otherwise his eyes are already failing. Of course, Kurama treats them quickly, but the proportions in which he uses Mangekai simply cannot be compared with the speed of treatment, which means that sooner or later his world will go out if he does not change his eyes. After using Sensorics for a moment, Naruto stopped abruptly. Kurama growled indignantly, almost falling off his head. Yugito immediately woke up, but did not give herself away, but simply listened to Naruto's conversation with the fox. Why did you stop? The fox was indignant. Don't you feel anything? Kurama listened to his feelings for a moment and his eyes widened. Itachi, he growled, ready to move into battle at any moment. That's right. Uchiha nodded slowly and released one leg of Yugito, folding a simple seal. His clone appeared next to him. The clone nodded and headed forward at top speed. The fox sat in frustration, not understanding what was happening. Naruto, explain yourself. I don't understand you. Why did you send a clone? We could kill two birds with one stone, and have a good fight, and get your eyes, otherwise my chakra does not have time to regenerate them. I know, he nodded calmly, picking up the girl's second leg again and rushing around to his clone, whom he sent forward, but we can't go into battle with Akatsuki right now. Explain yourself. Firstly, to enter into a fight with Itachi means to use Sharingan 100%. Secondly, it is not a fact that he is there alone, without his partner. I'm unlikely to pull two at once right now, most likely Kurama, my eyes will close somewhere in the middle of the fight. And, thirdly, I do not intend to sacrifice Yugito on a whim, because of Sharingan, who is now simply physically unable to resist Akatsuki, besides so strong that, well, the fox grunted grumpily, settling back comfortably on top of his head. I don't understand why you care so much about this girl. And you want to mess with her? Yugito pricked up her ears to hear his answer and either confirm her thoughts that he was only pretending to be kind, or refute them that, you don't understand anything, Naruto answered quietly and almost indistinctly. I just want to help her. You know, she reminded me of something far away, something that I felt only once when Itachi began to train me. I do not know why, but I feel good next to her, as if all the weight of the world that was hanging on my shoulders falls, just to see her. I do not know what it is, but I want to help her and protect her. Yugito held her breath, unable to realize it. Kurama nodded with satisfaction and no longer pestered him with questions, just leaned over to the girl and barely whispered to her just one phrase, don't disappoint me, Yugito. I can't wait for him to propose to you. Nibi's loud words made Yugito blush and nuzzle Naruto's back harder. Naruto realized that Yugito had woken up, but didn't say a word, wondering, how much did she hear? However, it might even be a good thing that she overheard the entire conversation with Kurama. Maybe then she will be able to trust him completely. Although she trusts him now, but from time to time he feels excitement, fear and uncertainty from her. And he doesn't want her to be afraid of him. He was the last person she should be afraid of. He knew for sure that he would never hurt her, even though he did not know the reasons for it. Naruto was just sure that if necessary, he would protect her even at the cost of his life. And he would pay any price to Tsunade for doing everything possible to get Yugito back on her feet. Yugito didn't even suspect what thoughts were spinning in Uchiha's head. She was so immersed in herself that she did not immediately feel how they stopped again and that the chicken this time still flew off the top of his head, catching on his jacket at the last moment. What is it this time? He growled angrily, climbing back up. Is something wrong, Naruto? Yugito asked, noticing that the guy twitched slightly from the loud growl of the fox. The clone has dissipated, Naruto replied meekly and continued on his way. And? Kurama impatiently tapped him on the head with his paw. Better give me the chakras, I'll move us to the Hokage. What if she has someone in her office or some kind of meeting? The fox growled lazily. Then it will be more fun, or do you want to stay on my head all day instead of walking freely? Kurama opened one eye without question, gave him the required amount of chakra and closed the eye again. Yugito, are you ready to be in Konoha? Yes, the girl nodded, frowning. But why haven't you used this technique before? Because, Uchiha grinned, this technique has a small distance limit. And now we just entered the area of the seal. Naruto was silent for a few seconds, and then slowly began to fold the seals. Better close your eyes, Yugito. The first time it may not be pleasant. Yugito obediently closed her eyes and after a moment felt as if something was pulling her in. She snuggled closer to Naruto's back and the last thing she heard was the sound of thunder. And then when she opened her eyes, they were standing in front of a beautiful woman with blonde hair. She must have been writing something, because her hand froze a centimeter from the scroll, and her eyes widened in amazement. Yugito hid behind her savior, only peeking fearfully over his shoulder. Uchiha. The woman had moved away from their sudden appearance, and was now slowly getting up and flexing her fists. What are you doing, you fucking Uchiha? It's not proper for a Hokage to swear. Calmly, not a bit worried, the aforementioned shook his head. Yes. The village leader's right eye twitched. And the fact that you scattered so many important papers with your appearance, is it normal? I haven't slept for 2 days because of them. It's a matter of 5 minutes to collect them, Naruto replied without changing his tone. I have a very serious request for you, Tsunade, and an equally serious conversation. Now I'll just punch you and we'll talk. Tsunade hissed threateningly and raised her fist when Kurama joined the conversation. Naruto, why do you put up with this old lady? It probably seemed to the fox that he said it quietly, but still Senju heard him and her eye twitched even more. What did you say there, furry rug? Tsunade, calm down. Be quiet. From a quiet, threatening whisper, Senju instantly calmed down. Kurama impressively jumped off his head and lay down on the table of the Hokage. Yugito shook slightly from this whisper. Naruto felt a small tremor behind him and mentally hit himself on the head. He walked over to the sofa near the wall and gently sat Yugito down on it, smiling reassuringly at her. Uchiha gently took her hand and squeezed it a little before turning to Tsunade. As I said, I have a serious request and conversation for you. I'm listening, muttered Hokage, looking wistfully at the papers. Naruto calmly summoned a dozen clones and asked them to collect all the papers. While they were smartly collecting them, Uchiha sat down next to Yugito, putting a scroll next to him, which was behind his back. Were you able to cure Rock Lee then? He began without preface. Yes, I could. At least the chances of success were not too great. Senju nodded, curiously examining the girl in front of her. Now he is not a very bad shinobi of the Chunin class. Fine, Naruto nodded, putting his hand on the girl's shoulder soothingly. Yugito, this is Tsunade Senju, the 5th Hokage. Tsunade, this is Yugito Ni, the former kunoichi of the cloud. I saved her from Akatsuki, but her spine is damaged. I want to. You want me to see what I can do, right? Sage Fox nodded and Hokage smiled gently. Nice to meet you, Yugito. That's just. Tsunade fell silent, meaningfully looking at Uchiha. Just now? He growled. What will I get in return for my help? She smiled innocently. Information and 2 Uchiha. Steel was already ringing in his voice. That's not enough, Tsunade said haughtily and with a hint of amusement. And what do you want, you? Yugito opened her eyes wide and was about to hiss at her, like a cat that has something taken away from her, when she continued. I want to see you, Naruto. As a shinobi leaf, Uchiha stared at the Hokage, then shifted his gaze to Yugito. Jinchuriki Nibi swallowed nervously. She knew that maybe he would refuse. After all, she was nobody to him to sacrifice freedom and become a devotee of any village. Nodding to something, Naruto turned his gaze back to Tsunade. I agree, but only under 3 conditions. Yugito looked at him in surprise, expecting any words other than these. The 5th was also in shock, but not for long. When his words reached her, she smiled so widely that she looked like a cat who had eaten too much sour cream. She even clapped her hands. Then what are your conditions? First, you will examine Yugito and do everything in your power to put her on her feet and fix the damage done to the internal organs. Naruto began to bend his fingers, not paying attention to the gleam in Kurama's eyes, who woke up from his last words. Second, first I will return 2 prodigal Uchiha to Konoha and you will change Itachi and me eyes. Third, if I become a Konoha shinobi, I will obey only you personally and no one else. That is, I will no longer obey the next Hokage and will be free to leave the village without being declared a nuke nin. Do you agree to my terms, Tsunade? Yugito could see the gears turning in her head, scrolling through everything Naruto said. Tsunade was torn between answering him, yes, and giving him a good thump so that he wouldn't fight anymore. I agree, she nodded slowly, already calculating what this threatens her. Fine, Naruto smiled with the corners of his lips, then you will examine her now, and later in the evening we will talk. Okay. Tsunade looked wistfully at the pile of scrolls and papers that had not decreased at all. Shizune, after a loud shout, a young girl of about 28, with short dark brown shoulder-length hair and black eyes burst into the office. She stopped in front of the Hokage, waiting for further instructions. Shizune, Tsunade slowly walked to the table and threw off Kurama, who was outraged by such impudence, and looked at her assistant. Prepare a free room on the first floor of the hospital wing. Is something wrong, Tsunade-sama? With an unarmed eye, you could see how nervous she was. He happened to me, Senju waved her hand vaguely. Fell on my head out of nowhere. Nice to see you again, Shizune. The girl turned her head and her eyes widened in surprise. In front of her stood none other than Uchiha Naruto, who brought Tsunade to Konoha, helped her become Hokage and disappeared without a trace, without even saying goodbye. Naruto, he is the one. Yugito heard the warmth in Naruto's voice, and therefore stared jealously at the girl, studying her and not listening to Nibi laughing hysterically in her head. Shizune. Follow the order, Tsunade interrupted them a little nervously, looking with fear at Yugito's narrowed eyes. Hi, Hokage-sama. Shizune left as quickly as she appeared, only a shaky stack of papers reminded her of her departure. Hokage-sama. The door of the office opened abruptly, a stack of papers finally fell on Kurama, who did not have time to escape, and a pink-haired kunoichi stood on the threshold. Not now, Sakura. Senju snapped. Naruto calmly got up, hung the scroll back behind his back, picked up Yugito, who immediately blushed from their contact, and turned to Tsunade. We'll meet you at the hospital. Hurry up, you and I will have another interesting conversation about two brothers all the way to the hospital. Yugito snuggled up to him and hid her red face from all the curious residents who were looking at them. Kurama ran alongside, tail high and scaring everyone with his gaze. He was clearly not happy with Naruto's decision to associate himself with the village, and Yugito genuinely did not understand why he was doing this for her. After all, she is nothing to him. Nibi, why do you think he does this? She couldn't help but ask her so-called older sister for advice. I don't even know, kitten, the cat sighed sadly. But be sure of one thing, he will not let anyone offend you. And it also seems to me, kitten, that he is not indifferent to you, he just doesn't understand his feelings for you yet. As far as I understood, Tsunade was surprised by how gently he acted with you, which means he does not often open his feelings and emotions to someone. Cherish it, it's perfect. And I just won't let you lose such a wonderful guy. Nibi grinned broadly and sent a picture into her head that she had seen not so long ago when she was swimming in the river. Nibi, she screamed, blushing even more and hiding her face in the shoulder of the wise fox. Naruto chuckled, but didn't say anything, so as not to embarrass her even more. Kurama then told how she was spying on him, and therefore he perfectly understands why she is embarrassed next to him. But of course he will not tell her about it, otherwise it is unknown how many colors she will have time to change in a few seconds. There was no one in the ward that Shizune had prepared. Naruto carefully placed Yugito on the prepared bed and sat down on a chair that stood nearby. Ni silently watched as Uchiha closed his eyes and leaned his head back in his chair. The girl had a rare opportunity to examine it. Only now Jinchuriki Nibi saw that her savior's features were saturated with fatigue. There was no usual mask of calm and confidence, as if they were alone, and he took off this mask, showing her his real self. Yugito was grateful to him for such trust, although she did not understand how she deserved it. She was just a burden. She was the one Naruto saved and brought to Konoha to get the necessary medical care, although he could have saved her and left her in that forest. Aren't you tired of waiting? Yugito shuddered at the voice that abruptly filled the room, destroying the cozy silence that reigned in it. No, Tsunade. Naruto opened his eyes and regained his mask of calm and composure. Proceed with the examination, please. Of course, Tsunade grinned at Naruto's impatience and immediately began her examination. She immediately turned the girl over on her stomach and her hands lit up with a green chakra. As they examined her, her eyes widened in surprise, and her fists itched to show the one who did this to her that it was not right to do so. Tsunade finished with the inspection and turned Yugito back over, looking at Naruto who was waiting for the result. I can only say one thing, Naruto. The black-haired man stared at her intently. You're not much of a medic, but at least you could do something. In general, thanks to you, her spine is no longer such a mess as it was originally. Can you restore it? Yugito listened to her verdict with a sinking heart. I can, the fifth nodded confidently, but first I will have to pull out all the fragments of the spine that got into the internal organs, and then restore the spine itself step by step. It will take at least 2 or 3 months, plus then a rehabilitation course. I understand you, Tsunade. Naruto smiled encouragingly at the girl and squeezed her fingers a little. When will you start treatment? Tomorrow, she immediately replied, but immediately frowned. But wouldn't it be better to leave her here in the ward? Naruto shifted his gaze to the startled Yugito, and immediately began to ponder what to do. It was clearly not comfortable to stay in the ward. It would be possible to take her to the Uchiha clan quarter, because she would have to be cared for anyway. Smiling confidently, Naruto focused his gaze on Senju again. I'll take her to my former home in the Uchiha quarter. And I will take care of her and bring her here at the specified time. Well, since you decided to take her to the ghost quarter, then fine, Tsunade smiled slightly. Then bring her here tomorrow at 12 o'clock and take a wheelchair from here so that you don't have to carry her in your arms every time. Tsunade smiled maliciously one last time and walked out the door without bothering to get an answer. Naruto calmly summoned the clone and sent him to get a wheelchair to a medic, and he smiled encouragingly at Yugito and picked her up again. Are you ready to go to a new house or do you want to walk around the village? Yugito looked into the soft black pools of her savior's eyes and understood one thing: she would never give him to anyone, even if she had to give her life for him. Home, she answered after a moment. I want to go home. You're going to stay with me, right? Uchiha looked out the window, thinking how long he would have to go to Tsunade, and turned his gaze back to the girl, nodding to her and hugging her a little harder. Of course I will stay. Yugito smiled brightly at him and nuzzled his shoulder harder, thinking how lucky she was to have him. Inside her, a huge cat was happily jumping around in a circle and persuading her to put him to bed. The girl had to work hard not to blush from the detailed descriptions of Nibi. Yugito did not remember the way to the Uchi quarter, as she peacefully sniffed into Naruto's shoulder. But when I woke up, I noticed the deafening silence that stood in this part of the street. Slowly lifting her head from the shoulder of the peacefully walking Naruto, the girl noticed a deserted street and no less empty houses. An overwhelming silence reigned around, so palpable that it seemed as if it could be touched. Yugito frowned shiveringly. She could not believe that life had once reigned here, that children had once run along this street, that it had once been a busy street. The girl looked at the face of her savior. His face was calm, and his eyes were empty, as if he was not here right now, but somewhere else, perhaps at the moment when this whole nightmare happened. Yugito wanted to break the silence, disrupt the train of thought and the flow of memories of the Sage of Foxes, wanted to find out what happened here. But she didn't dare. She was afraid that Naruto would not only not answer her, but perhaps even snap at her, angrily tell her not to ask this question anymore. The last thing she wanted was to provoke his anger on herself. You're wondering what happened here, right? Yugito shuddered at Uchiha's soft whisper and nodded a little scared. It took me 5 years to find out about the real story of what happened. But it turned out that the son of the head of the clan, the young genius Uchiha, was given the task to cut out the entire clan in order to prevent an uprising, to stifle the civil war in the bud. But my teacher, Itachi, didn't kill everyone. That night he left me and his own brother alive. But if he was able to make him hate himself, oh, in me he just set fire to the interest to find out about what happened, to drip a lot deeper. And what I learned made me hate the Council of Civilians and the Council of Elders headed by Danzo Shimura. If one day you meet him and I'm not around, then don't listen and don't trust him. And if he tries to do something, then don't let a lot of your chakra from into this kunai. Naruto shoved an unusual curved kunai into her hands, the entire blade of which was covered with small seals. Why did you tell me all this? Yugito couldn't find the words to explain his frankness to her, a girl he hardly knows, at least personally. She could only ask him her ridiculous question and tighten her grip on the handle of the kunai. Because I trust you and I want you to be safe here. The wise fox paused for a moment and stopped. He looked seriously into her eyes. Remember, Yugito, I will always protect you and I am the last person you should be afraid of. I would never do anything to hurt you. Yugito couldn't find the words to express her feelings. She was just suffocating from an overabundance of her own feelings. No one had ever trusted her so much and did not want to protect her. The only living being who cared about her condition was Nibi, but no one else cared about her. And now she just couldn't express her emotions. The only thing she could do was to shed tears and bury her nose in Naruto's neck, and continuously whisper a pathetic "thank you." Naruto smiled a little sadly at her and walked to a large house on the outskirts of the block. This big house had been empty before, loneliness had always reigned in it, but now it was sad, since this block might now forever be so deserted, and it was joyful, at the same time, that there would now be another living soul in this house besides him. Kurama was already sitting at the door and waiting for them. He didn't care that there was no one else here besides them. So maybe it's even better, no one will interfere with his sleep, except only Naruto and Yugito. Inside the house, everything is overgrown with dust and covered with cobwebs, because God knows how long no one has lived here. Naruto had not really lived in this house before. He liked to visit it only in the morning, so that no one would worry, and spend the rest of the day and night either in the forest or on top of Mount Hokage. But now this house looked not only empty, but also abandoned. Uchiha realized that he had a lot of work to do today and he would not have time to rest before meeting with Hokage. At that moment, his clone appeared on the threshold with a stroller in his hands and circling the space around him with his gaze, decided to quickly evaporate, as if he wasn't there. Sighing heavily, Naruto put the girl in the stroller and called for 5 clones, who, like their master, sighed heavily, but set about their front of work. One of them went to get groceries, and the rest went to get detergents and to their rooms. Is there anything I can do to help? Yugito didn't want to sit idly by, she really wanted to help him clean up the house. Don't. Naruto sat down in front of her and smiled gently. It's better while I'm cleaning, master the house. This will be useful to you, it is better to know the location of all the rooms here. And please make a list of what you need, and my clone will buy it all. Agreed? Yes. Yugito did not even nod, but she did not think to take offense at it, because she understood that she was unlikely to be able to help him now. Yugito decided to explore only the first floor. After all, she is unlikely to be able to get to the second floor without help. There were at least 5 rooms on the ground floor. Hall, kitchen, hallway, and 2 rooms that are located further from the stairs. One of the rooms was adjacent to the basement. There were a lot of unnecessary things in it. But the last room was once residential. Apparently, Naruto lived in it. There was one painting in this room with some man who partially reminded her of Naruto. He had the same black hair and eyes, which even from the picture seemed to be soaked with cold and at the same time caring. His black onyx eyes expressed confidence and strength. Yugito tore her gaze away from the painting and looked at the bedside table next to the bed, on which shurikens were scattered. There was nothing else in the room, of course, except the bed and the closet, which had a pair of black shorts and a pair of white t-shirts with a high collar and a clan symbol. The house itself seemed to be abandoned, but at the same time it was bright. The light of the setting sun illuminated the whole house, infusing warmth into it, and Yugito could say that it was the most beautiful house she had ever seen, and she was sure that in the morning it would be even brighter and more beautiful here. She was so amazed by the view that it took her a moment to realize that she was being called to the table. It even seemed strange to her that Nibi had been silent and hadn't said a word until now, but she understood perfectly well that Nibi needed rest to recover most of her strength lost in the battle with Akatsuki. Naruto was waiting for her at the table, who gave her a slightly forced smile with the corners of his lips and invited her to the table with a gesture. There were several cups of ramen on the table and hot steam was coming out of the pot behind Uchiha's back. Yugito closed her eyes and sniffed the pleasant aroma floating in the kitchen. Kurama, who smelled the food, quickly climbed onto the table and looked at Naruto, who pointed to his cup. They silently began to eat, and the girl did not dare to break this peaceful silence that reigned in the kitchen. She did not want to destroy this idol that hovered in the room. But at the same time, she had a lot of questions. Having made up her mind, she still slightly pushed the cup away from her and looked at the black-haired man, who was eating slowly and paying no attention to anything. Naruto, the girl called him uncertainly, tearing him away from his own thoughts. Can I ask you a few questions? Naruto looked up at her, trying to figure out what was the matter, and, noticing the determination in her eyes, nodded. Whose painting was in the room you once lived in? Yugito just didn't know where to start, so she decided that it would be better if she started with this question. Is that where the black-haired man is? The girl nodded, and the guy smiled a little at the corners of his lips. This is my biological father, Uchiha Madara. Previously known as one of the founders of Konoha and its biggest trader. So you're his son? Yugito just couldn't believe it. Naruto was the son of a friend of Hashirama Senju, the first Hokage. Even the cat in her subconscious choked on her own saliva from this discovery. But what does biological mean? I also had a foster father. He paused for a moment, considering whether to tell her or not, but quickly came to a decision. My stepfather, if I may say so, was Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage. True, he died the moment he sealed Kurama in me. Yugito sat in prostration and tried to gather all the information together, but it went out of her hands badly. As she got to know him, she realized more and more that she was not worthy of him, but at the same time she did not understand how he could be so kind to her and, most importantly, and how did you manage to get Kurama out of yourself? The girl decided to change the subject abruptly, as she saw that the memories of Naruto's family were getting darker and darker. He pushed the cup away from him and leaned back in his chair. Firstly, his chakra has remained in me, at least half of it has definitely remained. Secondly, if I had pulled him completely out of myself, I would most likely have died. Thirdly, I simply altered my seal and concluded a personal contract with him, according to which I can summon him at any time, in any place and at any distance, at which we would not be. That's the whole secret. Naruto fell silent thinking about something, but after a few seconds he spoke again. If you want, I can do the same for you and for Nibi. Really? The girl looked at him hopefully. She wanted to give her so-called sister at least a little freedom, at least a little to repay for everything she had done for her. Yes. The corners of Uchiha's lips twitched in a slight half-smile. But I will do this a little later, before I leave Konoha for a while. And, will you leave Konoha? Yugito's eyes reflected an undisguised horror. She was afraid to be left alone in this village, even if nothing threatened her here. But what about me? Yugito, from the soft and gentle tone, the girl raised her lowered head. Who said that I would leave you? Yes, I will leave the village, but only for a while, and besides, you will not be left alone. I once created a technique in the likeness of clones, only called it the technique of dividing the body. The clone created with the help of this technique is almost the same as the original, only he will have less chakras than me, but he cannot be killed with one blow, like an ordinary clone. Besides, I'm not leaving right away, Yugito. The girl looked into his eyes, which were soaked with tenderness directed at her, and nodded uncertainly. Now she knew one thing for sure, Naruto would be there for her whenever she needed it and no matter how far away he was. I believe you, she finally said in a slightly uncertain voice. Then let's finish eating and I still have to go to the Hokage today. Yugito pulled the cup to her again and stared blankly at it, and then she heard his whisper. I will always be there, Yugito. It was then that she smiled happily and asked him for more. That evening she didn't get to know him much better and realized that she could trust him with her life, and that he would never betray her or harm her. Perhaps one day she will entrust him with all her feelings and the most terrible secrets that she had as a child. Naruto walked slowly through the village. He was tormented by nostalgia. It's been so long since he's been here. Previously, he often walked along these streets with Itachi, who after training took him to Ichiraka ramen, dango shop or just to a restaurant. He loved Itachi as a brother, as a sensei and mentor. He knew that he could always count on him, could turn to him for advice and he would never betray him. And because the cutout of the Itachi clan was a cruel blow to Naruto. He couldn't understand why he did that. No. Not even like that. Why didn't he take it with him? Why did you leave him? Now, of course, Naruto understood everything, but he could not change anything. Now he can only flatter himself with the thought that he will be able to return Uchiha to Konoha. He only hoped that he had the strength to defeat two at once. Itachi will wait, he said himself, he will wait for both of them. Uchiha is sure that Naruto, like Sasuke, will come to take revenge on him. Well then he will be a bummer. You're too thoughtful today, Uchiha. Naruto shuddered when he heard Tsunade's voice, and only then realized that he not only reached the residence, but also went into the office without knocking, just like to his home. My apologies, Hokage-sama. He bowed slightly and sat down in the chair opposite her. So what did you want to talk about? Hokage asked busily, putting her feet up on the table and taking out a bottle of sake with bowls. First of all, about Danzo. Naruto began to count his fingers. Secondly, about Itachi and Sasuke. And, thirdly, about Akatsuki in the Kage meeting. What meeting? Tsunade almost dropped the precious bottle of sake, but caught herself in time and poured it for two. I visited the Reikage residence not so long ago and overheard a very interesting conversation between Kage and his right hand. Uchiha stopped, paused, drank the liquid in one gulp and continued as if nothing had happened. So, Hei decided that it was necessary to wait a little while until the Akatsuki caught almost all the Jinchuriki, except for two, and then act as the affected country. They say Uchiha from Konoha attacked their Jinchuriki eight-tailed. After that, he wanted to gather all the Kage to judge who is right and who is to blame. Konoha would be in an unequal position. And then the Reikage would have the right to demand either to punish the culprit, or to receive Konoha's Jinchuriki. How do you like this arrangement? Tsunade silently pondered everything Naruto had told her. And the prospects were not rosy. If you do not return the Uchiha to the village, then the Reikage may well put everything that way. And Tsunade didn't doubt a bit that Hei asked. Hokage looked at Uchiha's serious face and gulped down half a bottle before Naruto took it away from her and finished the rest. Perhaps this wise man was the only one with whom she liked to drink. He does not judge, does not get drunk quickly, and most importantly drinks for company. Now about Danzo. Naruto took out another bottle of sake from under his cloak. I'll tell you straight, Tsunade. You'd better kick him out as head of the Umbu root. I have so much dirt on him that if I want, no bastard will dare to yap that it's not right and not legal. Okay, I see you don't like Shimura. Where is your dirt? I have nothing to love him for. Here, Uchiha took out a heavy folder from the seal on his wrist and threw it on the table, then filled the bowls and drank in one gulp, coughing slightly. Tsunade looked longingly at the folder and the stack of papers next to it and, ignoring the bowl, drank several large sips from the bottle. And what about the Uchiha? Everything is simple there. Naruto followed her example and drained almost the entire bottle. Today I met Itachi and I had a very interesting conversation with him. Flashback. Naruto rushed straight to Itachi, he wouldn't do anything to him anyway. In the case of a trap, the clone will simply disappear, and the original will know everything that happened. Here a spacious clearing appeared, in the middle of which Itachi was standing. His eyes were closed and there was no one around, which is even strange. Taking a deep breath, Naruto jumped forward and found himself a few steps in front of him. Hello, Naruto, Itachi said calmly, without opening his eyes. Hello, Itachi. It's been a long time since we've seen each other. The sage relaxed, he knew that nothing would happen to him anyway. What are you doing here? You're without two-tailed, Itachi said affirmatively. I came to talk, then I'm listening. Itachi chuckled a little and abruptly opened his eyes, in which 3 Tomio swirled, folding into a Mangekyo Sharingan. Naruto was still in the same clearing, but black crows with Sharingan in their eyes were circling around him and Itachi now. An illusion. Let it be so, this is my world, Tsukuyomi. Itachi broke the silence first. I'm not here to fight, I'm here to give you a message. From whom? Naruto asked calmly. From the original. What does he want? You want revenge, don't you? What is it? He asked half-assuredly. Then I'll be waiting for you at the Uchiha hideout, the one that was preserved after the First War. I'll be waiting for Sasuke there too. Hurry up, Naruto. Itachi closed his eyes, and then looked at Naruto with pain and fatigue. And save it for me. One of the birds that flew in the illusion abruptly rushed to Naruto and flew into his mouth. He coughed, spat, tried to swallow, but eventually dissipated. And past everything that was happening to the original. End of flashback. That's it. Naruto drank the rest of the sake and looked into Tsunade's eyes. What do you say? Hokage did not think for a long time. She just took 3 bottles of sake out of the drawer, handed one to Uchiha, and drank the second herself. After waiting for Naruto to finish his own, she poured the 3rd bottle into the bowls. They were already drunk, but they were thinking clearly. The only thing was that the legs almost did not obey, but the tongue did not slur. Now I understand why you want to leave in the next few days. Decided to get there when Itachi and Sasuke are fighting? Yes. To kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Okay, she spilled again. Let's drink to luck, then it's for bringing the 2 prodigal Uchiha back, and luck is not useful to me. Naruto grinned and clinked glasses with her, knocking over the burning drink at once. Is that all you wanted to talk about? In principle, yes. Naruto looked at her warily. Then you'll keep me company for the evening. Tsunade took out 2 more bottles from the drawer, and Naruto could only sigh bitterly. It looks like today he either won't reach home, or he will, but with incidents. Yugito had been restless with excitement for several hours. Naruto went to talk to the Hokage, left the fox with her and said that the conversation would not last long. But now several hours have passed, and he is still not there, and the fox is strangely silent and does not answer questions. What about the owner? The house was boring. She had already examined everything that was possible, and in her position only the 1st floor was available to her. She couldn't get to the 2nd one even if she wanted to. She could only look at the portrait of Madara and photos of Naruto, where he is small. Yugito didn't even expect to find a photo album with his photos in the drawer. As a child, he was very nice and not forced. Ni saw a child there who is happy next to a mentor. And now in front of her she sees a man who has known pain and suffering, who has gone through all the torments and tried not to lose himself during all the experience. She felt sorry for him to some extent. But she was more offended that all this fell to his lot. And she was also delighted that it didn't break him. He remained a kind and caring person, albeit cold to others, but loyal to those he trusts. And Yugito was flattered by his trust. She felt warm at heart from the fact that there is such a person in the world on whom she can rely and who will never betray or turn away from her. Suddenly, something crashed at the front door and the whole house was filled with ornate curses. At the door, a black-haired guy stretched out on the floor, who could not get up in any way, and therefore cursed. His legs got tangled, and when he managed to get up, he fell back as soon as he took just a step. Yugito could hardly contain her laughter, looking at him, but still couldn't stand it and laughed when Naruto spat on everything and decided to crawl to the room, but unsuccessfully fit into the jam where the doorway led to the kitchen. Uchiha decided that he would not move from his place anymore, so he turned over on his back and looked at the ceiling before turning his gaze to the girl. "Sorry I'm late," he said in a completely sober voice, which you can't tell from his gait and coordination. "It's just that we had a few drinks with the hokage, and she didn't want to let go of such a good companion, ahem, that is, the interlocutor. Can I help you?" Yugito asked doubtfully, looking at his new attempts to get up. "No, don't," he fell back to the floor. "I'd rather stay here. Next time it will be a lesson to me, not to drink with Tsunade anymore." "Go to sleep, Yugito, you need strength, and I'll sleep here." Naruto defiantly closed his eyes. "Good night, Yugito." "Good night, Naruto slightly opened his eyes and looked at the girl. When she realized what she said, she quickly blushed, turned around and went to the room that once belonged to Uchiha. The sage waited until she closed the door behind her and sighed heavily, but a kurama immediately formed next to him. "What did you get drunk from?" The fox growled. "Yes, just tired." "Well, yes." Biju climbed on his chest, wagging his tails. "And what did you drive the girl away from?" "I didn't drive her away, she was just tired and needed rest." "You could use it, too," Kurama growled sententiously. "And it wouldn't hurt for you not to keep everything to yourself and share problems with others. Besides, if you didn't notice, then you offended the girl." "What?" Naruto raised his head and stared at him. "I saw how sad she was when you sent her to bed, and I saw how she tried not to show her disappointment at not being able to talk to you." "Damn it," Kurama growled with satisfaction and went back to print. Naruto slowly got up and just as slowly walked towards Yugito, holding on to the wall and swaying at every step. Yugito, when he got to the room, was already in bed and peacefully sniffing, smiling at something in her sleep. Uchiha reached the bed and carefully sat on the edge, looking at her peaceful face. The hand reached out to her hair by itself and slowly stroked it, from which Yugito softly purred, and Nibi in her subconscious cunningly rubbed her paws, enjoying the successful material for teasing Jinchuriki. "Sleep, Yugito, everything will be fine," Naruto whispered, kissed her lightly on the cheek and settled down next to the bed, taking the girl's hand in his. The sky outside the window was clear, every star was visible. "Here is one of them," broke into flight, and the sage made a wish that he always wanted to be fulfilled. He made his innermost wish, which gave him the strength to fight and go to the end, and which he hoped one day to realize. He wanted to start a family and find long-awaited peace. He will fight to the last, for the sake of Yugito and Kurama, for the sake of Itachi and himself. One day he will have a family, big and happy. The next morning, Naruto barely opened his eyes and moaned softly from the pain in his head, trying not to wake the quietly dozing girl. Carefully, holding his head, he left the room and headed for the kitchen. Cold water and attempts to persuade the fox to help with the pain did their job, and after a few minutes Uchiha was full of strength again. Half an hour later, Naruto was sitting at the breakfast table and waiting for Yugito, who went to wake Kurama, thinking about his further actions. First, it was necessary to get Nibi out of the girl. Which is not so difficult to implement. How long? Because you need to carefully monitor how much you pull out the chakras, so as not to pull it all out and not empty the reserve of the Jinchuriki. Secondly, it was necessary to create a blood clone. Here the whole difficulty lies in the cost of the chakra, because half of it goes to the clone and how much more of it goes only to the technique. Is that how much chakra will he spend on this technique? Okay, maybe Kurama will recover along the way. Thirdly, it's time to go to the meeting. Sasuke won't be looking for Itachi for so long. Although, after all, he does not know where that shelter is located, and he may be detained along the way. It would be nice if so, and then Naruto would have had time not only to the very height of the battle, but also would have looked at its beginning. It wouldn't hurt to warn Tsunade, but I don't want to go to her office after yesterday, especially when she sees her pig. But what they did to her yesterday, together, die. A voice growled in his ear. Naruto jerked sharply and almost fell off his chair, glaring angrily at the fox, who was grinning at the top of his head and was already eating his portion. "Good morning," Yugito said to break the silence. Naruto nodded and smiled at her. "Bon appetit, Yugito," the girl smiled back and nodded to him. Naruto saw that she wanted to find out about what happened yesterday, but did not ask her question. Therefore, he decided not to torment her and told her himself how he and Tsunade talked, got drunk and did a little things, such as, repainted and changed the pig, decorated it a little, burned all Kakashi's porn books, framed Jirai, who was collecting material for his books at that moment and quarreled with the elders. What now they're mad at each other. Kurama was laughing at this time, as he had the opportunity to review all of the above in his memories. Yugito, however, did not lag behind, vividly imagining all this, as did Nibi. But the cat hadn't missed the opportunity to pawn Naruto yet, and now the girl couldn't help but blush every time she had to look at the sage. "Yugito, I think that tonight I will be ready to pull the bijou out of you," Naruto interrupted the cozy silence after they finished breakfast. "So you're going to leave soon?" Yugito sighed sadly and turned away. "I will leave only for a while, and, besides, I will leave my clone, which will be no different from the original. I know, it's simple." Yugito didn't finish her sentence. "Whatever happens, I will return back to Konoha and will not leave you," Naruto calmly said, understanding her fears and misgivings. She thought he could just leave his clone and never come back, even though she knew he wouldn't do that to her. She was sure of it. The girl raised her head and, not boldly, slightly uncertainly, smiled at him, and, meeting an answering smile, hid all her fears deep in her subconscious, because Naruto would never do that, would not leave her. He is too noble for such meanness. "When are you going to leave, Naru?" "Naru?" Uchiha blinked in surprise, and Yugito blushed. Well, I like it." He smiled with the corners of his mouth, and Yugito averted her eyes, equaling the color of a tomato. "What about the trip, then?" He thought about it, calculating the options and the time. "It takes almost 3 days to get to the shelter from here, and it is not yet known when Sasuke will get there, so we must hurry. I think tomorrow night. I will spend all the time until the evening creating a clone and replenishing a small part of the chakra. Kurama will help with the rest of the recovery." "I'll help. Where will I go?" The fox growled from his place. "I think we need to clean up the kitchen a little now and go for a walk around the village," Naruto decided, collecting plates. "After all, you will need to go to a treatment session soon." By evening, one of the rooms on the ground floor was ready to extract the bijou. Yugito, blushing wildly, took off her outer clothes, except for her bra. Nibi subconsciously slipped her pictures of her and Naruto in a compromising pose. Naruto chose not to pay attention to the changing complexion of the girl, preparing for extraction. Uchiha helped the girl to move to the bed, belly up. The seal was above average and left much to be desired. Naruto sighed and put his hand on her stomach, filling her with his chakra. When the seal was fully revealed, he began to open her defenses. Ni squeezed her eyes shut from the pain, focusing her attention on Naruto in order to distract herself from the pain and not inadvertently interfere with him. Having opened the protection, Uchiha began to slowly pump the chakra out of the girl, releasing her into the air, that is, into the room. Yugito couldn't breathe from the pain, tightly squeezing one of the sage's hands and unable to endure the pain. Naruto was completely focused on not pulling out all of Nibi's chakra from her, although the burning feeling of the chakra touched him as well. The whole palm was completely charred, the Biju chakra flowed higher, the fire had already passed along the entire length of the arm to the elbow, but Uchiha did not feel it, focusing on the seal and chakra. Finally, when Kurama growled nearby that it was time to stop, Naruto removed his hand, sealing the remnants of the chakra in Yugito. Next to Yugito, there was now a cute little kitty, waving two tails in the air. The girl smiled happily and rushed to hug Naruto, who made her dreams of freeing Nibi a reality. The guy gasped in pain, grimacing and clutching his hand. Yugito abruptly pulled away, feeling guilty for this, because if he hadn't pulled the Biju out of her, he would have been fine with his hand right now. Don't worry, Naruto smiled slightly, noticing that the girl was looking at him guiltily. It's all right, Kurama began pumping his chakra, starting self-healing. Naruto's regeneration has always been good, and with his chakra it increased by an order of magnitude. Naruto nodded gratefully to him, feeling the pain receding. Nibi stopped examining herself and happily climbed onto Yugito, purring with pleasure. The girl stroked her soft fur with pleasure, restraining a happy cry. Now you need to rest, Yugito, Naruto said with satisfaction. After all, pulling the Biju chakra out of yourself is not a joke. I know firsthand. Naruto got up from his knees, carefully covered the girl and went downstairs. Kurama and Nibi followed him. In the kitchen, the cat was constantly rubbing against a disgruntled fox, who, although happy, was not used to manifestations of such feelings. Nibi was distracted from him only when Naruto put a plate of ramen in front of her. The rest of the time they sat quietly, only sometimes Biju asked for more. Nibi murmured contentedly, settling down next to him. Thank you for everything, you're welcome, but if you offend me, Yugito, I will kill you. The cat smiled affectionately and Naruto arched an eyebrow. What are you talking about? I know how you treat her and how she treats you. So just try to hurt her and I'll get you from anywhere. I understand you. I promise that I will never hurt her. Naruto smiled conciliatingly. Well, Nibi arched her back and went with a proud gait to her mistress. The fox only growled at this, and Naruto snorted, holding back his laughter. The next day was a blur for Naruto. In the morning I cooked breakfast, then we walked around the village with Yugito, bought her and Nibi things, then went to Tsunade. Only his clone did all this, and Uchiha himself spent all the time until the evening creating a blood clone. Already in the evening, his own double was sitting next to him, full of strength, when he himself was tired through the measure. Kurama immediately began pumping his chakra into him, replenishing his reserve. 2 hours later, Naruto was ready to hit the road. After saying goodbye to Yugito, who was sad again, and after receiving a kiss from her, the guy dropped by the Hokage. There he and Tsunade again emptied a whole bottle of sake and said goodbye. Tsunade even wished him good luck. Within half an hour, Uchiha was at a great distance from the village. Well, his journey has begun. He will return 2 Uchiha back to Konoha. Can you smell them, Ku? Yes, the Kubi on Naruto's head carefully listened to the Uchiha chakra. They are 2 kilometers away from us. But, Naruto, there's some kind of fight going on right now. There's too much chakra in the space around them. I see. The sage shook his head slightly and increased the speed of movement. Ku, when we arrive, engage Sasuke in battle, but do not harm him and restrain the force. Okay, but you owe me. the fox grumbled and settled more comfortably on the head of his Jinchuriki. Uchiha got to the right place faster than he expected. Literally 10 minutes later, he was standing between two Uchiha, thereby separating them. Naruto looked at them both carefully, assessing the damage. Well, of the two, only Itachi looked unimportant. Sasuke was in a more or less normal condition. I see you have already started without waiting for me, Naruto sighed bitterly. It just so happened, Itachi replied calmly. Naruto turned in his direction and quickly rushed towards him. At the same time, the Kyuubi jumped off his head and assumed the size of a human, reducing the distance between him and Sasuke. Naruto shortened the distance, clashed with Itachi in taijutsu. Both kept up with each other. Blows rained down as if from a cornucopia. Then Itachi was on the defensive, then Naruto went into a deft defense. Naruto then shortened the distance, then increased it. The blows became stronger, the speed was higher, and the defense was stronger. Their entire body was filled with chakra. At some point, Itachi increased the distance between them and folded the seals. Kato, Gokakyu no Jutsu, the element of fire, the technique of the great fireball. Naruto immediately began to fold his seals, feeling the heat from the fire. Doton, Doryu Heki, earth element, earth wall. A stone wall appeared in front of Uzumaki that separated the fireball and him. The fire crashed into the wall and melted it with a cavity. Naruto, without hesitation, folded the new seals. Kato, Hozenka no Jutsu, element of fire, Phoenix Sage Flame technique. Itachi activated the Mangekyo Sharingan and released a wall of black flame Amaterasu, which absorbed Naruto's technique. The sage smiled faintly and activated his Mangekai Sharingan. Itachi closed one eye and a Susanoo skeleton formed above it. Naruto decided to keep up with him and activated his Susanoo. Now two Susanoo stood opposite each other, flaming red and blue. Both are armed and looking at each other. Both take off at the same time and strike at each other. The blows are getting stronger and stronger. Itachi and Naruto send Amaterasu at each other. At some point, the pain in his eyes became unbearably strong and Itachi doubled over, squeezing his eyes with his hands. Susanoo was dispelled, but he was not up to it now. Naruto realized what was happening, so he scattered his skeleton and, in the blink of an eye, shortened the distance, struck Itachi on the back of the head so that he would switch off and no longer suffer from pain. Exhaling wearily, Naruto sealed Itachi in a pre-prepared scroll. Then he turned to Sasuke, who had been kicked by Kurama before. The fox spent all the time that Naruto was fighting Itachi, having fun with Sasuke, from time to time kicking him harder than necessary so that it would come to him that it was better for the great Kyuubi no Yoko not to compete with some mortal. Kyuubi, that's enough. The sage looked seriously at the fox that pressed the Uchiha to the ground with his paw. Okay, Kurama grumbled, reluctantly releasing Uchiha. We need to talk. Sasuke, Uzumaki calmly looked at him. We have nothing to talk about. Sasuke jumped to his feet and, activating Chidori, attacked Naruto. Uzumaki Uchiha simply dodged, taking him by the hand and directing the attacks into the ground. Then Naruto threw him over his back and pinned him to the ground, pinning his throat with his knee. No, you will still listen to me. Naruto looked at him with a cold look that promised him pain. Itachi slaughtered the entire Uchiha clan for the sake of the village. Hokage didn't know anything about it. He only thought that Shisui would stop the clan with his Sharingan. Danzo was behind everything. It was he who convinced Itachi to cut out the clan, although it was only possible to remove the participants of the conspiracy. Your brother left you alive and dragged you through the torments of Tsukuyomi so that you would eventually become strong, be able to kill Itachi and defend the village. I will destroy this village. Sasuke was burning with hatred for Konoha, fool. Naruto lightly hit him in the solar plexus and waited for him to come to his senses again and be able to listen. You don't have to destroy Konoha, but kill Danzo. After all, it is Danzo who is behind the massacre in your clan. And besides, the Uchiha themselves are to blame. It's not a fig to organize an uprising and use a child to keep an eye on the village. Calm down, Naruto exhaled heavily and released Uchiha. I'll bring you back with Itachi to Konoha. Tsunade will accept you both. And Itachi, and you. She and I will also transplant you, me and Itachi's eyes to see well and activate the eternal Mangekai Sharingan, but you first need to activate the usual Mangekai, so forgive me for what? Sasuke looked at Naruto in disbelief, right into his eyes, for this. Tsukuyomi, Sasuke stood in front of him for a minute with a glazed look. Then his eyes came back to normal and Sharingan swirled in them, which put together a Mangekai drawing from 3 volumes. A few seconds and Sasuke is standing in front of him with an activated Sharingan and tears pouring down his cheeks. Where is Itachi? Is he alive? Sasuke screamed hysterically, looking around. Now go home, Sasuke. Naruto hit him on the back of the head, sending him into unconsciousness, and sealed him in a scroll. Then he waited for Kyuubi to climb on his head and activated Hiraishin, the flying god of thunder, moving to the Hokage's office. At the same time, in another place Konoha Yugito sighed heavily, rolling over from her stomach to her back. Tsunade had just finished another operation and was breathing tiredly. Naruto, clone, immediately appeared next to her and helped her turn over, and then put her in a wheelchair. Yugito nodded gratefully, but she wasn't going to do anything more, although she wanted to. She just knew it was a clone. Even if it's on blood, even if it's indistinguishable from the real one, but it's still a clone. Ni sighed heavily and turned her gaze to Tsunade. Let's go to my office, we won't talk much. Yugito didn't answer, but just nodded. The clone was about to take up the arms of the chair, but at the last moment he felt something and dissipated. Yugito looked at him in shock, because it meant that either he died or he dispelled it himself. Yugito didn't want to think about the first option. He was too scary. She decided that she would find out everything in due time, but hoped that he was alive. Well, it seems that I will have to help you. Tsunade took hold of the arms of the chair and rolled Yugito out of the hospital. All the way to Tsunade's office passed in silence. No one asked a question, everyone was thinking about their own. Yugito, is Naruto alive? And Tsunade is talking about his paperwork, which is getting more and more every day. When Tsunade opened the door to her office, her eye twitched nervously. Naruto was standing in the middle of the room, covered in blood and bruises, and all the papers were lying around him, both disassembled and not. Yugito's joyful shout brought her out of her thoughts. Then a vein on Tsunade's forehead swelled and she went to Naruto, rolling up her sleeves. I'll kill you, you fucking Uchiha. Tsunade was about to hit him, when a fox appeared in front of her, which grew to her size and blocked her path. Why don't you hit him later, huh? He's holding on to pure will right now. Kyuubi growled all this in her face. Now treat him. He may die in a day or two, or his eyesight will fail. I can't treat him now, Tsunade. Naruto attracted the attention of Hokage. Transplant Itachi's eyes to me, and Sasuke's to him. To whom are mine, I think you understand. Naruto smiled slightly and printed out the 2 brothers. I'll kill you later. Tsunade growled, running up to him. Of course, Uzumaki forced a smile and fell forward, losing consciousness. Naruto. Naruto woke up after a few hours. Opening his eyes, he turned his head uncomprehendingly. He didn't see. But after a second realization came and he raised his hands to his face, groping for the bandage. With a sigh of relief, he lay back on the bed and fell asleep. The next time Naruto woke up from the feeling of someone's hand on his in a very familiar voice, just wake up, asshole, and I'll kill you, and I love you, Tsunade. Naruto smiled a little and turned to the Hokage at random. Naruto, you're awake." Yugito tightened her grip on his hand. "Well, I promised." Naruto sent her a smile, unmistakably guessing from her voice where she was. "Tsunade, can I take off the bandage already?" "Take it off, anyway, everything has already been regenerated by Kyuubi." Naruto immediately began to untie the blindfold. After a while, he opened his eyes, but immediately closed them. "The sunlight hurt my eyes too much." After getting used to it, he opened his eyes again and blinked. After a little hesitation, Uzumaki directed the chakra to his eyes, feeling how his vision changed. Naruto no longer felt the pain of using Sharingan. So he managed to get the eternal Mangekai Sharingan. Naruto smiled broadly and deactivated the Sharingan. "Thank you, Tsunade." The sage turned to her and gave her a wide smile. "Everything is fine." Tsunade did not freely melt and smiled at him, forgiving everything. "Just please don't break into my office with Hiration again, okay?" "Agreed." Naruto nodded. "Okay, I'll leave you, lovebirds." Tsunade smiled maliciously and left the room. Naruto looked at Yugito and, turning around, hugged her. Slightly pulling away, Uzumaki lightly kissed her. "I was worried about you," Yugito confessed, blushing and looking away. "It became especially scary when your clone disappeared." "Shoo, it's okay. I'm here and I'm already fine. And I dispelled the clone because I needed a chakra. I've already figured that out." Ni smiled sheepishly. "Let's go home, huh?" Naruto smiled, lifted her head by the chin and, unable to resist, again weightlessly kissed her on the lips. "Let's go." Yugito sincerely and openly smiled at him, blushing. "That's the end of it."